I have created scientific magic. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. A wizarding land like heaven. For the next 2 days, Abel was trapped in this small room, suffering from both physical, hunger, and mental, watching others eat, torture. During the process, he thought of various ways to escape, such as sneaking away by climbing over the wall while going to the toilet, or secretly using the edge of the bed to prop up the shackles in the middle of the night, trying to break them. As a result, he was caught by Owen and beaten up. After being beaten several times, Abel, who was starving and had no strength, had to temporarily give up the idea of escaping, and the temptation brought by food became stronger and stronger, until the evening of the next day. Abel finally couldn't help it. When Owen started to enjoy today's dinner, he carefully picked up a piece of white bread and prepared to take a small bite to replenish some physical strength. Even if there are some psychedelic substances added to it, a small dose will not have much effect. Abel bit into the bread with a look of fearlessness. The soft and sticky texture of the white bread immediately spread on the tip of his tongue. The instant stimulation made Abel, who had been hungry for 2 days, almost cry. He immediately forgot about his face and the non-existent danger and ate with relish. A mouthful of white bread, coupled with the delicious beef sauce, was simply irresistible. At this moment, he seemed to have arrived in heaven from hell. Owen looked at Abel, who was eating voraciously, and was not surprised at all. For a person with a confused mind like this, he would be fine after a few days of starvation. Owen, who had been hungry as an experimental subject in the past, could naturally understand that feeling, so when Abel went on a hunger strike to show his determination, he ignored him at all. After a delicious meal, Abel collapsed on the bed. His original idea also changed a little. He no longer wanted to die, but decided to keep his useful body and get some information. What if he escaped? Moreover, in the past 2 days, Abel has also keenly noticed some strange things. Although his magic power has been suppressed, the other party has not completely restricted his personal freedom. If he wants to, he can wander around in this manner, but there will be someone following him, and as long as he shows the idea of escaping, he will be beaten up. Are you really from the land of wizards? After 2 days of silence, Abel looked at Owen and asked for the first time. Of course. Owen nodded. Then where is the land of wizards? How did you come to the kingdom of Hadrada? Abel asked in succession. Owen hesitated for a moment before speaking. I need to ask Lord Lin En if he can tell you. Wait. Abel hurriedly stopped Owen, who was about to get up. In the past 2 days, he has vaguely realized that this kid named Owen is an honest child, and he doesn't have so many messy thoughts. At most, he just hits too hard. He is an excellent target for trickery, but if he reports it to the wizard named Lin En, his plan will be ruined. Thinking of this, Abel quickly calmed Owen down, skipped those sensitive topics, and said that he was just very interested in the so-called Wizard Holy Land, so he wanted to learn about it. Under Abel's constant indirect questioning, Owen told him what he saw and heard in the wizard land. To be precise, in the port of Yaita. What is the airship that is bigger than a house and allows ordinary people to fly into the sky? The alchemy car that can run through the entire city in just 1 hour. The wizards of the Magic Research Institute have also developed an alchemy machine that can automatically sow and cultivate the land. These almost fantastic words made Abel wonder if he had seen the wrong person. He didn't expect that this kid looked honest, but he was very good at fooling people. Yaita has built a lot of new factories recently. As long as you are willing to work hard, no one will go hungry, Owen said very seriously. This was unthinkable a year ago. Born in the South City, Owen knew very well the arrogance and indifference of the wizards. In their eyes, the worthless poor were just tools for experimenting with magic, so Owen had no good feelings for wizards. But Lord Lin was different. Lord Lin would give high relief funds to the poor who were hit by the tragedy in the South City, rent the obsolete steamboats to fishermen for free so that they could go fishing farther away, and send wizards to kill the more ferocious sea beasts in the nearby waters. Before he left Yaita, There were rumors that Lord Lin was preparing to build a large ship made entirely of steel, install the latest internal combustion engine, and make a very large fishing net, which could tow more than 10 tons of sea fish back to the port at one time. At that time, everyone's lunch, in addition to white bread and an egg or tomato, could also have a grilled fish. Many townspeople felt that this fantasy was unrealistic. How could a large steel ship float on the sea? Even if it was made with magic, no one would use such a steel ship to fish. But Owen firmly believed that Lord Lin would not lie, and every word he said had been fulfilled, no matter how ridiculous it sounded. Abel just listened to Owen constantly bragging about someone's great achievements, and his expression became more and more strange. In his description, the wizard land was just as beautiful as the paradise promoted by the church. Does such a place really exist? A place where there is no hunger, and even the poor can eat white bread and grilled fish? The sincere emotion in Owen's words made Abel a little confused for a while, whether it was true or false. While thinking, a loud noise came from outside the door. Abel subconsciously stood up from the bed, and his first reaction was that someone came to rescue him. But he quickly rejected this guess because he did not hear the panic shouting and the explosion caused by the interweaving of magic. It should be the airship that is loaded with cargo that has returned. Owen was not surprised at all. He calculated the time and quickly came to a conclusion. Airship? Abel paused for a moment, then realized that it was the alchemical machine that Owen had just mentioned, which was bigger than the house but could allow ordinary people to fly into the sky. I want to go out and take a look. Owen did not stop him. Lord Lin only asked him to monitor Abel to prevent him from escaping, and did not restrict his actions in the manor. The two quickly opened the door and went outside. On the empty lawn in the manor, Loud and others had already been waiting there. Everyone looked up at the sky, as if they were waiting for something, but there was nothing in the sky except the blue sky and white clouds. Chapter 227. Only smart people can see this airship. Where is the airship you mentioned? Where is it? Abel raised his head and saw nothing except the blue sky and white clouds, so he asked mockingly. Master Lin said that only smart people can see it when it flies. Owen scratched his head and said weakly. Abel choked and glared at Owen in great annoyance, wondering if the other party was deliberately playing a trick on him and making up a non-existent thing to fool him. Just as he was thinking, a dull sound came from the front, and the ground seemed to shake slightly. Abel turned his head quickly, and found that the vast grassland in the distance was a little strange, as if it was pressed down by something heavy. Then, as the polarization magic was lifted, a huge monster as tall as 5 or 6 stories of a house turned from virtual to real, and soon appeared in front of him. It was blue-green in color, and its surface was covered with strange alchemical patterns. The cockpit below looked like a towering ship, tied to the huge oval airbag above by strong chains, and looked majestic. Abel couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. This is the airship? Could it be that the legendary wizard land really exists? The huge and imposing airship in front of him undoubtedly refreshed Abel's cognition, and made him realize that Owen's words just now might not be a lie to deceive himself. As the door panel of the cockpit was lowered, several wizards in robes walked down from the airship, one of them holding several heavy boxes with the mage's hand. Compared with the astonished Abel, the servants on the side were already used to it. One by one, they stepped forward to help carry the boxes of glass products into the house. Loud soon discovered that this time, there were more people coming to support than before. In addition to the 7 official wizards, there were more than a dozen halflings, and even Lydia, Darren and others came. But this was normal. It was said that Lord Lin was preparing to make a very powerful alchemical instrument, which required a lot of manpower. Loud did not dare to be idle while thinking. He walked onto the airship and carefully moved an iron box more than 1 meter high from the airship with everyone. What is this? Abel asked curiously when he saw that several people were so cautious. It's called an alchemical internal combustion engine. It is a creation of technology and magic. It is the source of power. Of course, this thing can also be used to assist in power generation. Lin's figure appeared out of thin air beside him, which scared Abel a lot. But soon, Abel's attention was attracted by Lin's words. Auxiliary power generation? Could it be some kind of alchemical instrument that can cast thunder magic? Lin En, Weren't you still in the academy this morning? Lydia looked at Lin En, who suddenly appeared in front of her with surprise, and almost suspected that she had hallucinations. It was clear that 11 hours ago, Lin En was still saying goodbye to her and the Yaito Academy. Could it be that the dean ran faster than the airship? You can understand that I used a magic, Lin En said with a smile, and then led everyone into the temporary magic laboratory. Abel also hurriedly followed. At this moment, in the magic laboratory, a group of wizards were surrounding a huge cut magnet, arguing with each other. Have you studied anything? Lin En asked casually. Magnetite is one of the specialties of the kingdom of Hadrata. This ore that can absorb iron is considered by the church to be a godstone with strange powers, so it is strictly controlled. It took a lot of effort for Lao to get such a large piece of magnetite, Master Dean. This ore is very magical. It can spontaneously attract some metal products without the need for magic, and two magnets can also attract or repel each other, Orlando said with interest, and was very interested in this magical ore. This thing can generate a magnetic field, so it can absorb those metal products. Lin En explained with a smile. He had also read some magic books about electromagnetic effects in the wizard land, but there were very few wizards who studied this thing. After all, there is no magnetite in the wizard land, so the only two things that can be used as samples are the lightning in the sky and the bioelectric current of the creatures themselves. Magnetic field? Orlando paused. The last thing called field is the gravitational field. According to the universal gravitation theory proposed by Lin En, it is a kind of adsorption force brought by space distortion, which acts on any object. However, this kind of magnet can only absorb specific things. Master Dean, is this also a phenomenon of gravity? A wizard from the Yaito school hurriedly asked. No, magnetism is magnetism, and gravity is gravity. Lin En shook his head. Seeing that everyone present was extremely curious, he began to explain. As we know, everything is made up of elements, and inside the elements, electrons rotate constantly and revolve around the nucleus. Both movements will produce magnetism. The special thing about magnets is that they have magnetic moments. The elements inside are arranged neatly according to a specific rule, thus forming a strong magnetic field. They were confused by Lin En's explanation of the principle. They could only simply understand that the arrangement of elements inside the magnet can spontaneously form a kind of magic. This is a naturally formed alchemical creation, so it has magical power. Then why can only iron be sucked up? Orlando asked in confusion. Lin En smiled and did not answer directly. He picked up an iron sword and placed it on the cut huge magnet. The two immediately fit tightly together. About 5 seconds later, Lin En pulled up the iron sword with all his strength and placed it on an iron block. The iron block trembled slightly, and after a moment it jumped up spontaneously and attached to the sword. This magical scene amazed everyone present. Lydia also had a curious expression on her face. Although Lin En had explained to her the principle of frictional electricity and the adsorption of small pieces of paper a few months ago, the two seemed to be different. Didn't the dean rub the iron sword just now? Master Lin En, what's going on? Is it a phenomenon of magic conduction? Orlando was completely confused and could only use his magic knowledge to explain this strange phenomenon. For example, the magic originally stored in the magnet was transferred to this iron sword. Because magic can flow between specific substances, this is also the principle of some enchantment magic. Chapter 228 Electromagnetic Effects. No, this has nothing to do with magic, and it can't be described as conduction. Lin En shook his head and rejected Orlando's guess. In fact, you were wrong just now. It's not just iron. There are also two substances that can be attracted by magnets, cobalt and nickel. What they have in common is that they can be magnetized. Under the influence of the external magnetic field, the electron spins inside them can spontaneously align in a small range to form a spontaneous magnetization zone. In other words, it is temporarily magnetized and becomes a magnet. In most substances, the directions of electron movement are different and chaotic, and the magnetic effects cancel each other out, so they are not magnetic. Lin En explained casually. Wait, you mean that because these magnets have the power of thunder, they can attract iron products? Abel asked hurriedly. He didn't understand Lin En's long speech at all, but heard the word electron. And iron can conduct electricity. He still knew this. What do you think electricity is? Lin En asked. A violent and difficult to control element. With extremely fast speed and amazing power, Orlando said thoughtfully. Abel nodded proudly. Even in Master Anthony's school, only a few wizards could master thunder magic. This was the power they risked their lives to gain. That's it? Nothing else to add? Lin En asked with a smile. I know. Lightning is a phenomenon caused by the movement of electric charges. There are two types of charges, positive and negative. The same charges repel each other, and the opposite charges attract each other. In addition, it also exists in each of our bodies, so we can move. Lydia talked about the formation principle of electricity. The wizards present all had surprised and astonished expressions on their faces. They didn't expect that this halfling girl who couldn't do magic had such a deep understanding of lightning. Orlando was even more curious and asked what electrons and electric charges were. Under the questioning of Orlando and others, Lydia's face became redder and redder, and she stammered and couldn't answer. She just repeated all the knowledge that Lin En had taught her before. If she really had to explain these terms, she would have no way to do it. She could only look at Lin En frequently, her eyes full of hope. Since you have only learned half of it, don't show off. Lin En shook his head with a smile and reached out to flick Lydia's head. Scholars of the secret society believe that electrons are a kind of negatively charged subatomic particles, and electric charges are the positive or negative charges carried by objects or particles that make up objects. However, because the volume of electrons is too small, even formal wizards cannot sense them. Am I right, Mr. Abel? Lin En suddenly said. Seeing Abel nodded, Lin En paused and realized that the school he belonged to did not have the ability to sense electrons and electric charges. Dean, since we can't sense these tiny elements, how can we use the power of thunder? A witch couldn't help but ask. Every wizard knows the process of releasing magic very well. That is to find the element, record it with material deconstruction, and then use magic to mimic it. If you can't sense it, then naturally forget about casting a spell. Thinking of this, Orlando and others looked at Abel together. The other party was clearly a formal wizard, so how did he cast lightning magic? Abel was quite proud and had no intention of explaining. This was the most important secret of their school. But soon he heard Lin En on the side speak. There are many ways to create lightning, such as manipulating the magnetic field to create current, using temperature difference to generate electricity, biomass energy, solar energy. Lin En said a lot of things casually, and at the same time stared at Abel's expression, trying to figure out which method the other party used. However, the expression on Abel's face became more and more confused, as if he had been hit by this series of nouns. In his eyes, lightning is an extremely powerful and mysterious existence. After Lin En said this, it seems that anything can be used to cast lightning magic. Abel didn't believe it at all. If it was that easy, they wouldn't have to risk their lives to collect and store lightning on rainy days. He even began to suspect that these people might be acting a trick to get the secret of thunder magic from him. Especially Lin En's explanation of the principle of lightning, Abel was even more doubtful. You know, even Lord Anthony couldn't study the essence of thunder magic. Sir Lin En, you just said that these magnets have natural magnetic fields. Doesn't that mean that these strange minerals can be used to make electric current? Abel said half-believingly. Yes. Lin En nodded, and then asked Orlando and others to bring two magnets cut into arcs and adjust them to the shape of positive and negative poles facing each other. He picked up a silver block, used magic to dissolve it into thin silver wires, and then rolled them into coils, and then fixed them in the center of the two arc magnets, and finally connected them to the power system of the internal combustion engine. Turn it on now, Orlando. 1/10 of the power will do, Lin said. Orlando, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly started the internal combustion engine. The coil made of silver wire slowly began to rotate, and the speed was getting faster and faster. Everyone present was staring at the strange instrument in front of them. Dean Lin, where is the electricity? Where is the electricity? Lydia asked curiously. It's in these silver coils, Lin said, leaning over and blowing a breath. and the dust accumulated on the table immediately flew to the rotating magnetic coil. A crackling sound came from outside the rotating magnetic coil. It was a scene they had never seen before. The violent lightning seemed to be bound around the magnetic coil. The blue arc kept jumping and hitting the fine dust. Just as Lin said before, he created electricity. This is impossible. Abel's face was full of disbelief. He couldn't help but stretch out his hand, wanting to confirm whether the scene in front of him was some kind of visual illusion. This sudden action was beyond everyone's expectations. Lin En had no time to stop it. Abel's fingers had already reached into the two arc-shaped magnets. Before they completely touched the rotating magnetic coils, the flashing arc had already hit them. The strong current instantly penetrated his body. Abel's muscles all over his body were shaking violently. Before he completely fainted, only one thought remained in his mind. Yes, that's the feeling. It's electricity. The power of thunder and lightning. Chapter 229 The nemesis of all thunder magic, Faraday cage. The sudden electric shock of Abel startled everyone present. Orlando quickly turned off the internal combustion engine, but the magnetic coil continued to rotate. It was not until Lin En knocked Abel away with a weakened, magic shock, that this terrible scene was interrupted. Is he dead? Lydia looked at Abel lying on the ground, his hair standing up, and he was unconscious, and asked in astonishment. Probably not yet. After checking, Lin En shook his head and breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps because he had practiced lightning magic, Abel's resistance to electric current is much stronger than that of ordinary people. Of course, if the internal combustion engine was running at full power just now, unless the other party became an insulator, it would definitely be a death sentence. Lin En did not expect that Abel would be so stupid as to touch the electric current directly with his hands. Carry him down to rest, Owen. You should watch him. Lin En turned around and ordered, just in time. The next experiment was not suitable to be disclosed. Owen nodded and pulled Abel away with a look of disgust. Orlando and the others looked at Lin En at this time, asking curiously how magnetism can create electric current. They just saw the silver coil rotating in the two arc-shaped magnets. The two sides did not even really touch each other, but lightning was generated out of thin air. This is the electromagnetic induction phenomenon, Lin En quickly explained to several people. Electromagnetic induction, also known as magneto-electric induction, refers to the movement of a part of the conductor of a closed circuit cutting the magnetic flux lines in a magnetic field, and current will be generated in the conductor. The stronger the magnetic field, the faster the rotor coil rotates, and the stronger the current generated. With a magnet and silver as a conductor, this constitutes the simplest generator. The discovery of electricity is undoubtedly great and one of the most important cornerstones of modernization. The discovery and use of internal combustion engines and electricity is called the Second Industrial Revolution. However, Lin En did not want to develop various electrical appliances with this. That was a problem that needed to be considered in the future. With magnetism and electricity, he could consider making a genuine electromagnetic railgun. In fact, the principle of this thing is not complicated. When a conductor is energized and placed in a magnetic field, it will move forward due to the magnetic field induction effect. Continuously increase the magnetic field and electricity until the conductor flies out at a very fast speed. That is the electromagnetic cannon. In the previous life, the Federation even went crazy and created an electromagnetic cannon with a speed of 20 times the speed of sound. It can be said that it has taken the stone-throwing skills developed by humans from ancient times to another level. It is also the magic he reproduced using the real mirror image, which has the power of almost legendary magic. If this thing can be made, it will definitely be the strongest trump card of the Yaita school. It may be enough to deal with real legendary wizards, but it is enough to use it to deal with some great wizards or cardinals, although he can ask the parliament for help when he is in trouble now. Lin En will not put all his hopes on others. Abel was unconscious for a whole day before he woke up from the bed. His sore muscles were still trembling faintly, which reminded him that everything he saw before was not a dream or an illusion. This time, without waiting for Owen to speak, Abel took the initiative to propose the idea of meeting Lin En. Mr. Lin En, regarding the exchange of experience and cooperation on thunder magic you mentioned before, I need to go back and ask Master Anthony before making a decision. If nothing unexpected happens, he should meet you," Abel said solemnly, and after a pause, he added again, "You can send someone to accompany me. If you can go in person, it would be even better." Abel invited very sincerely. He felt that it would be difficult to convince his colleagues in the school even if he talked about it alone. How can this be done? What if it is a trap? Loud and others quickly rejected it. It was too dangerous. You make sense. A strange wizard's rash visit may cause some hostility. Lin En nodded, and then suddenly laughed. "So why don't you go on my behalf?" Loud. His spell was placed on the ring in Loud's hand, so naturally he had to let the other party do it. Loud was stunned and looked at Lin En stuttering. This, isn't this too bad? Going alone to the headquarters of another wizard school, facing a great wizard, even if it was just to negotiate. Loud couldn't help but feel guilty. Abel couldn't help but frowned. Although letting an ordinary person who couldn't do magic with him could reduce some criticism, it didn't have any effect. "I will prepare a gift. I believe it should be able to prove what you said," Lin En said. "What gift? Could it be the alchemical instrument that can produce electric current?" Abel asked expectantly. "No, it's something else." Lin En shook his head and continued. "The nemesis of all thunder magic Faraday cage. In a hidden secret room in the capital of Hadjarata, an old man with white hair and beard stood in the center with a solemn expression. As his mind surged, a strong and violent electric current was drawn from the lightning stones placed around him and surged towards his body. The lightning trees formed by the lightning piercing the air continued to emerge in the secret room, and the arcs spread rapidly like spider webs. Soon, only the sound of thunder was heard. The temperature rose rapidly, and the entire secret room had almost become a small thunderstorm area. The terrifying thunder continuously hit the magic barrier that protected his body, and then the current that was reduced layer by layer poured into Anthony's body and kept wandering around him. The severe paralysis and pain made Anthony's face paler and paler. His muscles gradually began to twitch, and arcs flashed faintly on the surface of his body. About half an hour later, Anthony, who had persisted to the limit, cast a spell to gradually calm the violent thunderstorm, and then couldn't help sighing. Unfortunately, it was still a little short. Taking advantage of the thunder power collected during the last storm, although it significantly improved his mastery of thunder magic, it was far from enough. Anthony's ambition was naturally not limited to this. What he really wanted was to crack the mystery of thunder magic, instead of using the dumbest and most dangerous method like now, which is to force the electric current into the body, and use the magic to record and reproduce the power of thunder in another way. This is particularly critical. You must know that the cardinal stationed in the kingdom is a six-ring clergyman. The only possibility for him to defeat the opponent is this powerful and unique thunder magic, otherwise, his plan for the magic kingdom is nothing but a castle in the air. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230 I am just a cripple who knows neither magic nor divine arts. The tightly closed chamber was finally opened, and Anthony walked out of it with a shaky step. The wizards gathered outside immediately surrounded him. "Teacher, are you okay?" The nearest witch hurried forward and tried to support Anthony. Just now, even from the outside, they could hear the rolling thunder in the chamber, and the energy intensity reached the level of 5th or 6th ring magic, which was much more dangerous than any previous experiment. "Fulla, I'm fine, nothing serious." Anthony waved his hand to refuse the support of several people, and then shook his head and sighed. "It's a pity that it still failed." "Teacher, you just need some time. There will always be another thunderstorm," the witch named Fulla said comfortingly. "It is not an easy thing to open up a new path of magic. Her teacher can control the natural power of thunder and create corresponding magic, which is already extremely great." Anthony nodded, dragged his tired body, and prepared to go back to the room to rest for a while, but then seemed to remember something and asked again, "Where is Abel? Is there any news about him recently?" Abel was one of the people he sent to investigate William. He had been missing for several days, which made him think of the worst possibility. I heard that a battle took place in a remote street in the capital 4 days ago. People nearby heard a thunderous roar. It is said that a large number of priests rushed there at that time. It is very likely related to Abel's disappearance, another wizard said worriedly. Anthony frowned slightly. It seemed that Abel had leaked his whereabouts and was captured or even killed by the clergy of the church. However, at this moment, a loud noise suddenly came from a distance, and then a servant ran in hurriedly and reported, "Master Anthony, Abel is back." Oh? Anthony paused. Fulla and others also showed joy on their faces. How is Abel now? Did he escape from prison? Lord Abel looks fine, but Lord Lear has quarreled with him because he did not come back alone, but brought a very important guest with him. The servant replied cautiously, "How dare he bring outsiders here?" A little anger also appeared on Fulla's face. This is the residence of the school. If the news leaks out and attracts the personnel of the Holy See, the consequences will be disastrous. Could Abel be coerced by someone? One of the wizards immediately thought of this. Abel has been missing for several days. Now he suddenly came back safe and sound. He couldn't help but wonder if the other party had betrayed them. That's impossible. I believe he won't betray us. How can we believe that? Did he ask Master Anthony before he brought outsiders in? He stayed outside for a few days. If he wasn't caught by the Vatican, how could there be no news at all? Several wizards from the school were arguing, and Fulla, who had recovered from her shock, asked what the person Abel brought looked like. It's a cripple who can't do magic or divine arts. He said he has something very important to ask Master Anthony to do. The attendant responded hesitantly. Hearing this, Fulla and others were stunned on the spot, not understanding what Abel was doing. Then let's go and see, Anthony said thoughtfully. Several wizards nodded, followed Anthony and walked towards the outside, and soon arrived at the conference hall. Most of the wizards and apprentices who stayed in the school gathered here, surrounding the two people in the center, with vigilance in their eyes. As soon as Fleur came in, she saw the middle-aged man standing next to Abel, who was hunched over, leaning on a cane, and looked ordinary, even a little bald. The only advantage was that he was dressed decently. After a glance, Fleur turned her eyes to Abel and scolded him fiercely. "Are you crazy, Abel? How dare you bring outsiders to the school without permission?" "I know what I'm doing, Fleur," Abel said firmly, and then looked at Anthony and saluted respectfully. "Master Anthony, I'm glad to see you back safely, Abel, but I think you should first explain where you have been in the past 4 days, and who is the friend next to you." Anthony's tone was very gentle, but it revealed that he could not be refused. "Master, this story started a few days ago." Abel immediately recounted the whole story, and then said that he had been a guest in the manor for the past 4 days and was well treated. "And this is the envoy from Greenreel, the wizard's land, Mr. Loud," Abel introduced. "Greenreel, the wizard's holy land that only exists in rumors?" Fleur asked in astonishment. "Is there really such a place?" The wizard next to him also questioned. "Of course it exists." Loud nodded and said politely, "Good afternoon, Master Anthony. Master Lin En asked me to express his most sincere greetings to you on his behalf." "Tell me your purpose," Anthony said directly. "Master Lin En hopes to talk to you about cooperation. We have the same interests and enemies, that is, to destroy the rule of the church," Loud said righteously. Anthony looked at Lord and did not respond. Even with Abel as a guarantee, he could not trust a force that came out of nowhere and called itself the Land of Wizards. In addition, Lord Lin has also done some research on thunder and lightning. I hope to have a chance to discuss it with you. Lord added hesitantly. "So you want to spy on the secrets of thunder magic?" Lear shouted angrily. "That's impossible. Expel him out. No, lock him up directly, and never let him reveal our whereabouts. Thunder magic is not something you can covet." The wizards present were also very excited, thinking that the cooperation that Lord said was just an excuse, and the other party's real purpose was to steal the treasures of their school under the name of the so-called Land of Wizards. Abel's expression became a little embarrassed, because many of these words were what he had said before. However, it turned out that his face was swollen. Chapter 231 Your thunder magic is meaningless in front of me. Seeing that his colleagues were getting more and more excited, and even proposed to imprison and interrogate Loud, Abel hurriedly explained. "Everyone, I can guarantee with my life that Mr. Loud's words are true. The wizard land is real and it is on the other side of the foggy sea," Abel said decisively. Although he had never been to the wizard land in person, the magic craft could not be faked. Whether it was an airship that was larger than a house but could fly into the sky invisible, or an alchemical instrument that could make electric current, it all needed to be supported by extremely solid magic theory. The most important thing was that before leaving the manor, Lin demonstrated an interesting gadget to him, which completely defeated Abel's suspicion. Because their so-called thunder magic had no meaning in front of the other party, Abel dared to guarantee with his life, which made some wizards hesitate. However, Lin and others were more determined to believe that Abel must have betrayed them. Anthony raised his hand to stop the quarrel, looked at Loud, and said in a deep voice, "Since you said you are from the land of wizards, where is the evidence?" "Our airship is parked outside the capital right now. If you are interested, you can go to the land of wizards to check it out yourself," Loud said solemnly. Thor couldn't help it immediately. This was simply a trap. But before she could refute it, Loud spoke again. "In addition, Master Lin En also asked me to bring a very interesting gadget as a gift. Please allow me to demonstrate it. I think you will be interested in it." "What gift?" Anthony asked, puzzled. Loud turned his head and looked at Lin. "Sir, you should have checked the things I brought, right?" "Humphrey, this thing can also be called a gift. It's simply an insult to Master Anthony." Lin snorted coldly, but still asked someone to push it up. Everyone's eyes were immediately attracted, wanting to see what kind of gift this cripple who claimed to be from the land of wizards brought. It was a cage that was as tall as a person, spherical, and woven with copper wire. Thor's face was very ugly, and the same thought as Lin came to her mind. "Can this be called a gift?" "It's called a Faraday cage." Loud hurriedly introduced it. "It's a magical spell, the nemesis of all thunder magic. Of course, I'm not a wizard, and I can't cast the corresponding magic, so I can only use this cage for demonstration." According to Lord Lin, their principles are the same. No matter how powerful the thunder and lightning are, they can't break through its defense. Loud's arrogant words instantly ignited the gunpowder barrel in the audience. Everyone couldn't help but stand up and glared at Loud, almost spewing flames from their eyes. "Ridiculous! You are looking for death. How dare you tarnish the treasure of our school and insult the thunder magic created by the great Master Anthony?" Lin scolded loudly. He had just checked it in detail. It was just a cage made of copper, and he couldn't feel any magic on it at all. "You have to know that the high temperature contained in a strong thunderstorm can even melt steel. And copper can conduct electricity. If a person stands in it, he will only be burned into charcoal by the strong current." Fola was also amused. She didn't expect that a person could be so ignorant, but she was more angry. In order to learn thunder magic, each of them was forced to endure hundreds of lightning strikes, and many colleagues fell on the road of experimenting, learning and using the power of thunder. Now this cripple who can't do magic pointed to a cage and told them that this thing is the nemesis of all thunder magic. This is a naked humiliation. Even Anthony's face showed some anger. Thunder magic is the result of his half-life research, and he will never allow anyone to blaspheme. Surrounded by a large group of wizards who can kill him at any time, Loud suddenly felt a lot of pressure. In fact, he didn't want to be so arrogant. But before coming, Lord Lin En specifically asked him to suppress the arrogance of these people so that he could take the leading position in the next cooperation. But looking at the current situation, Loud couldn't help but start to wonder if he was suppressing it a bit too much. Although he felt a little regretful, Loud still stood up straight and was not defeated by the almost materialized malice. After all, he now represented the Yayata school and even the entire wizard land, and he could not retreat. "Everyone, I have tried it before. Even an ordinary person who can't do magic can resist all the thunder magic I master with the help of the Faraday cage." Abel sighed. It was only after Lin En demonstrated the function of the Faraday cage that he really understood why Lin En sent Loud, who couldn't do magic. It was to tell them that once they mastered the method of confrontation, their thunder magic was actually nothing great. They couldn't even kill a civilian, not to mention those wizards who could use magic to build a Faraday cage. "Do you know what you are talking about, Abel?" Lin rushed forward and grabbed Abel's collar tightly, roaring, The facts will prove everything. Abel shook his head. If you have any doubts about this, you can try it yourself, Lord said, and walked straight into the copper cage, but soon added one more sentence. Of course, only thunder magic can be used. Since you want to die, you can't blame me. Liar let go of Abel, walked angrily to the front of the Faraday cage, raised his hand, and pointed at Lord inside. Lightning, storm. Liar used a 3-ring magic as soon as he made a move. A ball of dazzling lightning suddenly bloomed at the tip of his finger, and instantly turned into thick lightning snakes, hitting the Faraday cage. Accompanied by a violent thunder, the terrifying arc of electricity kept jumping and flashing outside the copper cage, and a strong current was transmitted along the copper wire to every part of the Faraday cage. Fulla and others stared at Lord in the cage, wanting to witness with their own eyes that this cripple who dared to ridicule the glory of their school was turned into charcoal by thunder. However, the facts were beyond their expectations. Lord just stood in the center of the cage, his 2 feet even arrogantly stepped on the copper cage, without any protection, allowing the thunder that was enough to kill him 100 times to continue to explode around him and under his feet. But his face remained calm. Chapter 232 Disappear in the thunder? This is impossible. Looking at Loud standing in the cage, unscathed by the thunder and lightning, Liar showed an expression of disbelief on his face, and even began to wonder if he was hallucinating. But Liar soon reacted and said viciously, Fulla, it seems that this thing has some tricks. You guys come too. He never believed that there was any so-called thunder nemesis. Maybe his previous inspection was not in place, and this so-called Faraday cage was cast with some magical magic, or it was simply covered with a layer of copper on the surface, but the inside was actually made of resin, sand, and rock that could isolate lightning. But even so, it would be smashed to pieces in front of more powerful thunder spells. Chain lightning. After Liar opened his mouth, more than a dozen wizards stood up and cast thunder magic together. Everyone took out all their strength and chanted spells. Dazzling lightning flashed from the void and blasted towards Loud. Still coming? Do you have to be so violent? The seemingly calm Lord was a little uneasy now. Although Lin En had demonstrated the magic of the Faraday cage to him before, seeing the terrifying lightning strike him, Lord still felt fear in his heart. His legs were trembling faintly, and he dared not move his body. He kept thinking about Lin En's words in his mind. The reason why people get electric shocks is that the human body can conduct electricity. Only when there is a potential difference between the human body can an electric current be formed. And the inside of the Faraday cage is an equipotential body, with zero internal potential difference and zero electric field. This is the key to protecting against lightning magic. He didn't know what the potential difference was, but he knew that these terrifying thunders were enough to turn him into ashes in an instant. So Lord didn't dare to move at all, for fear that the so-called equipotential body would disappear. The speed of thunder magic was faster than Lord's thoughts. The chain lightning, released by more than a dozen wizards, soon hit the Faraday cage. Almost substantial electric arcs kept surging, forming a thunder net with thunder snake patterns in the air, covering the entire cage. The strength of the thunder magic was more than 10 times higher than before, close to the level of 4th ring magic, and even formed dense electric sparks outside the cage. Lord's forehead was sweating, but just as Lord Lin said, all dangers were blocked outside the Faraday cage. Although the lightning was jumping around him, he did not feel any discomfort, as if these thunders were illusions. The only feeling was that a refreshing breeze was blowing towards him. Lord did not understand that this was called electronic wind, which was the airflow flying out from the negative pole. What a refreshing wind! Lord could not help but sigh, like the last straw that broke the camel's back, leaving Thura and others who had put all their efforts to increase the current completely dumbfounded. The cage was clearly covered by thunder. They could see bright electric sparks appearing around Loud, but he actually sighed with relief. How could they accept this? Lear was completely dazed. His face was extremely ugly. He could never accept that he risked his life and mastered the power of thunder, but he couldn't even kill a cripple who couldn't do magic. Could it be that this so-called Faraday cage is really the nemesis of thunder magic? Impossible. This must be an illusion, Lear shouted frantically. Maybe the other party is a very powerful illusion wizard who deceived their perception and used some magic to guide the thunder to other places. Yes, it must be like this. Thinking of this, Lear blessed himself with a mage shield, and then reached out to touch the Faraday cage. Don't touch it, Lear. Abel, who had had similar experiences, said anxiously. However, Lear was more determined. He had to expose this scam and directly pressed his hand on it. The violent thunder gathered near the Faraday cage immediately seemed to have found its target. Before Lear could get close, a lightning bolt as thick as his arm struck him and the whole person was blown away by the thunder. This was all real, not an illusion. Lear only had this thought in his mind. Lyle, Fulla and the others shouted in astonishment and hurried forward to check on Lear's condition. Just a little aftermath of the thunder directly penetrated the mage shield. Lear stretched out his arm, which was already charred. His neck and half of his face were covered with terrifying lightning patterns. He fell to the ground and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Everyone present was a little at a loss. Anthony, who had been watching, finally spoke. Everyone, get out of the way. Hope returned to the faces of Fura and the others. They looked fiercely at Lord, who had an innocent expression in the cage. Just because they, the formal wizards, couldn't do it, it didn't mean that their teacher, the founder of thunder magic, couldn't break this damn Faraday cage. Since you said it's the nemesis of all thunder, let's try this. Anthony's expression became very serious. A huge amount of magic power surged from his body. As his hair and beard fluttered, dots of lightning flashed throughout the conference hall. As the spells were chanted, lightning flashed faintly between Anthony's pupils. His aura became more and more condensed, and a suffocating sense of oppression surged in everyone's heart. Lord was like a great enemy, and he gritted his teeth and barely didn't kneel down. This was not because he felt embarrassed, but because he was afraid that his kneeling action would cause the so-called electric potential difference, and then he would be dead. As wizards, Fura and the others had a warning sign of death in their hearts. Even though Anthony's target was not them, the wizards present couldn't help but build a protective magic barrier, protective force field, mage shield. One after another, magic barriers emerged from the air. Seeing this, Loud's scalp numbed, and he regretted faintly in his heart that he should not have come here. Disappear under the thunder, heavenly punishment, thunder judgment. Anthony raised his hand, and the purple thunder that enveloped the conference room intertwined and gathered above the Faraday cage, turning into a huge lightning column, and fell down with a bang. The purple thunder arrived in an instant, and it seemed that only the shining lightning and the violent roar were left between heaven and earth. The power of the six-ring magic is undoubtedly terrifying. The entire Faraday cage trembled violently, and the violent electric current washed the cage made of copper wire. As the arc surged, the bricks and stones on the ground cracked layer by layer. Circles of ripples continued to echo in the conference hall, and the magic barrier laid by hundreds of formal wizards exploded in just a few seconds. Chapter 233, The Cracked Faraday Cage. Under the raging thunder, the conference hall has now become a ruin. A giant thunder vortex in the center is constantly swallowing violent lightning. The powerful destructive force causes the entire area to collapse. Even though Fulla and others reacted quickly, they were not completely spared. The violent force instantly blew away the nearest people. This is the power of thunder magic. Fulla wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, her face full of admiration. He's dead, he's dead, a wizard shouted excitedly. Under such great power, let alone a civilian who can't do magic, even a great wizard involved in it will have no choice but to die. What so-called Faraday cage will only turn into dust under such thunder. Ahem. Unconventionally releasing the six-ring magic is also a great burden for Anthony. His face is pale, and his eyes stare at the flashing thunder vortex, as if he wants to penetrate the barrier of lightning to see what's going on inside. This magic was originally his trump card to deal with Cardinal Ozak, but he used it at this time. He was eager to break this so-called thunder nemesis and justify the results of his years of hard work. 10 seconds later, the thunder vortex gradually disappeared. But what made everyone present despair was that although the copper cage was twisted by the falling rubble, it was still strong and stood upright in the collapsed ruins. Loud, who was in the Faraday cage, was dizzy from the violent impact. Obviously, he had not recovered from the lightning column that almost covered the entire area just now. "I'm still alive," Loud said in a trance, just as surprised as Fura and others. At the moment when the thunder fell, he thought he was dead, but the facts once again proved the power of the Faraday cage. Under the baptism of such a powerful thunder magic, he still did not suffer any damage. It was not until this moment that Loud suddenly realized that in order to maintain his balance, his hand had unconsciously grasped the edge of the copper wire. Sparks of electricity flashed, but he seemed to be fine. For a moment, Loud had the illusion that he had controlled the thunder. The conference hall was silent. Hundreds of wizards stared at Loud, who was in the copper cage, surrounded by electric currents, like the god of thunder, with their eyes full of disbelief. "He is still alive? Impossible. This is six-ring magic." Thor collapsed to the ground, thinking of those colleagues who paid the price of their lives to study and master thunder magic. If this so-called thunder nemesis really exists, then what is the meaning of these people's sacrifices and the pain he has experienced? Why? Anthony's body trembled violently. Under his perception, the structure of the entire Faraday cage could not be clearer. There was no life magic cast inside. It was just an ordinary cage, but it blocked his most powerful thunder magic, thunder nemesis. Anthony whispered softly, and the whole person seemed to be 10 years older. The thunder magic that he spent half his life researching actually had such a fatal flaw. Normally speaking, of course, the enemy could not fight with a cage, but for the great wizards of the same level, as long as they knew the method, it was not difficult to use magic to create a Faraday cage. Under the gaze of the people who were either astonished, or afraid, or hysterical, Loud swallowed hard, fearing that these people would get angry and kill him. "Can you tell me why this Faraday cage can protect against lightning?" Anthony stared at Loud in the copper cage and asked in a tone that was almost asking for advice. Lord Lin said that this is related to the elimination of the potential difference. "I don't know more specifics," Loud said cautiously. Anthony frowned and pondered what this potential difference was. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang in the conference hall. "Its principle is actually very simple. Because the current always flows from high potential to low potential. For example, when a person stands on the ground and is hit by thunder magic, the human body becomes a temporary conductor, directing the current to the ground. The Faraday cage is an equipotential body, and the potential of every point on its outer shell is the same. Since there is no potential difference, there will naturally be no current passing through the human body." At the same time as the voice sounded, a figure appeared out of thin air in the Faraday cage. It was a very young wizard, wearing a cyan robe, and the whole body was shining with the brilliance of magic. "Are you Lin?" Anthony looked at the young wizard who suddenly appeared in front of him, and quickly distinguished that this was not his real body, but should be just a magic projection. "Not bad," Lin nodded. Anthony didn't care what means the other party used to make the projection come here. He thought about the meaning of Lin's words. Although the so-called potential difference and equipotential body were new words that he had never heard of before, they were not completely incomprehensible. In addition, copper is a very good conductor. Under the action of an external electric field, the electrons inside the conductor will move to the surface of the conductor, generating an electric field of equal magnitude and opposite direction, so that the internal and external electric fields cancel each other out. "I call it electrostatic shielding," Lin En said with a smile. "You can understand that the Faraday cage uses the power of lightning to resist lightning." "I see." Anthony was shocked. "Yes, only the power of thunder is enough to fight against thunder." "Then how to crack this Faraday cage?" Anthony asked eagerly, but soon stopped, because this was obviously the most important secret. Moreover, after Lin En introduced the principle of the Faraday cage, he could not think of any way to crack this nearly perfect thunder nemesis, unless he used power other than thunder magic. Where there is electricity, there is magnetism. When the copper coil is energized, it will generate a magnetic field. "Why don't you try another method and try magnetic force?" Lin En said with interest. Anthony's eyes suddenly lit up, and he closed his eyes and tried to sense it. The electric current of the magic mimicry was being conducted along the copper wire, and an inexplicable force was radiating outwards. That was the magnetic field. Anthony suddenly opened his eyes, clenched his right hand, and a hoarse and unpleasant muffled sound came over. The Faraday cage, which was still strong under the high-voltage current of tens of millions of volts, began to bend and twist inward. "Enough! Enough!" Loud shouted in horror. The sturdy Faraday cage was no longer a guardian angel protecting him, but instead became a deadly cage. Chapter 234 Lin En, "My goodness, everyone has to receive electrotherapy." Anthony stopped his movements at Loud's urgent shout. The Faraday cage was already in ruins, turning into a spiky sphere that was concave inwards, and the electrostatic shielding formed on the surface was also completely destroyed. If Anthony had not been using a magnetic field to restrain the current, Loud inside the cage would have been electrocuted to death. Lightning and magnetism. The gray-haired old wizard looked at the Faraday cage that he had easily destroyed, his expression a little dazed. The previous second, it was still the nemesis of thunder, and the next second, because of the characteristic of generating a magnetic field when it was electrified, it became a real cage. Anthony then realized that it was not that the thunder magic he had studied had huge flaws, but that his research and understanding of it was too shallow and still superficial. The transformation of the strength of the magic was only a matter of a moment, just as the saying goes, for wizards, knowledge is power. Ha ha ha. So that's it, Anthony muttered to himself very happily, his face full of excitement, even as much as the feeling when he first controlled thunder. Although the wizards present did not fully understand Lin En's long speech just now, they saw a fact that the damn thunder nemesis was broken. The lightning magic they risked their lives to learn was not meaningless. This made Flora and others who had lost their spirits regain their spirits, and secretly remembered that magnetic force could break the Faraday cage. Lin En did not care about the disclosure of the principle and coping methods of this thunder nemesis. After all, it is not only metal elements that can be used to make Faraday cages. If someone uses this method to deal with himself, it will be a big loss. Thank you very much for your advice, Mr. Lin En. After experiencing the initial excitement, Anthony quickly regained his sanity, looked at the wizard in front of him who was a little too young, and bowed slightly to salute. "There are still many things I don't understand about electric potential and magnetic field. If possible, I hope you can stay here for a few more days. I have many questions to ask you, teacher." Thora and others shouted in astonishment. For those who were born in the kingdom of Hadrada, the great wizard Anthony was the most powerful and wise person in their eyes. Now seeing the gray-haired teacher bowing his head to a wizard who was not even as old as them, it was a little hard to accept. Anthony didn't care. At his age, he had already put down his face. If he couldn't break through the legend, he would probably die within 10 years. What he was thinking about, in addition to the dream of the Magic Kingdom plan, was to glimpse the mystery of thunder magic. He was eager to know what thunder and lightning were, how they were formed, and why they existed, and the wizard in front of him was the only one who could answer these questions. Just from the principle of creating the Faraday cage and the conversion of electromagnetic relations, Anthony understood that Lin En's understanding of thunder and magnetic fields was probably far beyond his imagination. It was not only Thora who was surprised by the attitude of the great wizard, but Lin En was also quite surprised. Although there were many high-level wizards in the wizard land who were willing to lower their status and discuss magic theories with him on an equal footing, it was the first time he had seen someone like Anthony directly use a tone like asking for advice and learning. After all, he looked too young. In a group like wizards who needed to accumulate knowledge and show their power, people would always have some doubts. This was why he often appeared in the image of other scientific masters and then deceived them. Lin En pondered for a long time, and then spoke. "Of course there is no problem, but this is just an incarnation of mine, and the time I stay is limited. If you are interested, you might as well join the Secret Law Society, and we can have a deeper discussion in the field of magic." As he spoke, Lin En threw the secret law ring that he had prepared long ago, and it landed accurately in Anthony's hand. Secret Law Society? Anthony looked at the ring in his hand engraved with strange runes. You can think of it as an academic organization dedicated to exploring the true meaning of magic. This ring is both a token and a key to enter the magic field. The time is 12 o'clock tomorrow night, Lin En explained casually, and then paused and spoke again. I have a question that I would like to ask you to answer. Logically, you should not be able to feel the existence of electric charge, so how do you control lightning? This is a question that has always puzzled Lin En. At first, he thought it was related to the magnetic field, and magnetism generates electricity. After all, the kingdom of Hadrota has a large magnetite. But Abel obviously has a very limited understanding of the phenomenon of magnetism generating electricity. He was surprised by the magnetic generator, so his guess must be wrong. Our method is to weaken the power of thunder and then conduct it into the body, so that the magic in the body gradually becomes familiar with this strange power, until it can use magic to mimic thunder. Anthony said directly, this process is very long, according to each person's talent. It usually takes hundreds or even thousands of electric shocks. Not everyone can master this degree. So far, more than a dozen wizards have died under the overly strong current. Listening to Anthony's story, Lin En's face became very strange. Good guy, everyone has to undergo electrotherapy, right? Really brave. No wonder Abel was able to withstand the electric shock with his body before, but he was alive and kicking after a long rest. It turned out that he was used to it. After saying that, Anthony looked at Lin En, looking forward to his evaluation. Well, it's a unique method. Lin En squeezed out this sentence from his mouth for a long time. Of course, these words are not meant to be sarcastic. Anthony is equivalent to using the characteristics of magic in reverse, allowing formal wizards who can't sense electric charge and magnetic field at all to use the power of thunder magic in advance. It can be regarded as a shortcut to gain power. Thinking of this, Lin En glanced at the conference hall that was completely destroyed by the thunder magic just now, and Lair who fainted on the ground and didn't know whether he was dead or alive, and spoke. I think you still have some troubles to deal with, so today's meeting ends here, and it's time for us to go back, Lord. After the words fell, the magic projection turned into a faint light and disappeared in front of everyone. Lord straightened his robe in a pretentious manner, bowed to everyone, and then said goodbye. Chapter 235 This is the true meaning of thunder magic. After Loud said goodbye and left, Fulla and the others all breathed a sigh of relief. Everything that happened before was like an unreal dream to them. Teacher, what should we do now? A wizard asked helplessly. If they really come from the land of wizards and have a lot of knowledge about thunder magic, it's not a bad thing, Anthony said in a deep voice. In fact, there is more than one wizard school in the entire Hadrota kingdom, but those people are not at all powerful. If they rashly recruit them to participate in his plan, they may cause trouble, but this does not mean that they do not need allies. The power of the church is deeply rooted in the kingdom, and wizards are still in an absolutely weak position. If they did not get the tacit consent of that person, they would not be able to hide under the eyes of the church. The legendary wizard Holy Land, Fulla whispered softly. She had naturally heard about the rumors about the wizard land, but she had always thought that it was just the fantasy of some wizards. How is Lear? Anthony turned his head and asked. After checking Lear's condition, a potion master shook his head and sighed. He was seriously injured. His right hand is probably broken. He needs to recuperate for a while before he can recover. Fortunately, at least his life has been saved. It's good to be alive. Anthony nodded. The broken right hand was nothing. As far as he knew, there were at least 3 kinds of potions that could reconnect broken limbs. Of course, each one cost a lot of money. Fulla, you guys take care of this place. Abel, you come with me. Anthony spoke again. He was very interested in Abel's experience these days, especially the internal combustion engine and the alchemical instrument that could generate electricity. The rest of Fulla and others cleaned up the meeting room that had turned into ruins. Fortunately, when casting the spell before, Anthony had already activated the protective magic that enveloped the entire station. Otherwise such a strong energy fluctuation would have attracted the staff of the church long ago. A day passed in a flash. When the wizards cleaned up the last piece of fallen bricks, midnight had already arrived. Anthony took Fulla and the others back to the secret room and carefully put the ring on the ring finger of his right hand. Do a good job of protecting the base. If there is a major crisis, wake me up. Anthony solemnly warned a few words, and then activated the magic on the ring. The next moment, he found that his consciousness was divided. In front of him was a void space, unable to distinguish up, down, left, and right. There was endless darkness all around, and only a few dots of light shone in the distance, and one beam of light was the brightest. This light was not candlelight, and it seemed to be able to penetrate a distance of tens of millions of miles. And he seemed to be wandering in this void and dark space at a very fast speed. When he got closer, Anthony found that the particularly shining light was actually an extremely large fireball. He couldn't even find any words to describe the hugeness and grandeur of this fireball. It was like a furnace hell, with huge waves of flames rolling on the surface. "What is that?" Anthony murmured. "That's the star shining in the universe. The sun above our heads." Lin En's figure appeared in front of Anthony. He looked around and said with a smile, "Where are they?" Anthony glanced at the dense light spots in the distance, and had a vague guess in his heart. "Of course they are all stars, but they are too far away, so their light is dim." Lin En responded freely, "And this is outside of time and space. You can think of it as a projection of the universe created by the secret society. We will discover the laws of nature and engrave them in it. When it is completely perfected one day, maybe this will become a second real universe." Lin En said with emotion. He didn't dare to have such an arrogant idea before, but after seeing August project the doomsday domain into the real world, he had such an idea. Universe projection? Anthony was shocked. Although he had overestimated this secret society as much as possible, the other party's hand was still far beyond his expectations. A projection of the universe? What kind of boldness is this? And what kind of precise and perfect magic theory is needed to support it? Anthony couldn't imagine it at all. "So the secret society is the leader of the wizard land?" Anthony asked thoughtfully. In his opinion, perhaps only such a wizard holy land could have such a big hand. "No, the secret society is just an academic research organization. It exists in the wizard land, in the Sekka's empire, or outside the empire," Lin En explained casually. "We are keen to accept every wizard with an academic research spirit to explore the mysteries of this world together." Lin En's answer surprised Anthony, but he soon understood that it was a wider range, covering the academic research organization of the best wizards in the entire continent. "Now he has become one of them. Thank you for your answer, Mr. Lin En." Anthony took a few deep breaths, suppressed the fluctuations of his emotions, and then continued to speak. "But I still have many doubts, and I hope you can give me some advice. I want to know what lightning is. Why is it formed and why does it exist?" Anthony couldn't wait to ask. This was a question that had been bothering him for a long time. "Electricity is a natural phenomenon produced by static or moving electric charges," Lin En said, stretching out his right hand and snapping his fingers. Many faint light spots appeared around the two people. "Electric charges are divided into positive and negative. Two charged substances will exert forces on each other and feel the forces exerted by each other. Objects with the same charge will repel each other, and objects with different charges will attract each other. When two charges meet, they will release a lot of light and heat. This is what we see as lightning." As Lin En spoke, the faint light spots around him began to tremble, and began to simulate the attraction and repulsion of positive and negative charges, just like naughty children hugging each other or perhaps staying away from each other in disgust, and finally gathered and collided together. Dazzling light flashed in the black space, and arcs like spider webs were drawn in the void. Anthony looked at everything in front of him intoxicatedly. This was what he longed for, and now it was presented to him in such an intuitive way. Chapter 236. This is the answer to electricity and magnetism. Maxwell's equations. This is the cause of thunder. Anthony came back to his senses after a long time, whispering softly, and then suddenly thought of the mutual repulsion and attraction between positive and negative charges, which is very similar to the characteristics of magnets. So electricity is magnetism, and magnetism is electricity? Anthony said excitedly, as if he had discovered a new continent. He felt that he had glimpsed the mystery of thunder and magnetic fields. You can also say that electricity and magnetism are inseparable and interdependent, just like water and ice. Lin En nodded. Anthony seemed excited, and then became confused. Since the two have the same origin, Why do they appear in two different forms? Many questions kept flashing in his mind, and Anthony could only look at Lin En anxiously, waiting for his answer. If you want to know this, you must first understand what the magnetic field is. Lin En smiled and explained. According to the research of scholars from the secret society, it is a special form of matter that exists in the space around magnets, electric currents, and moving electric charges. It is a vector field that has direction and value at any position in space. For example, the planet under our feet is a huge magnetic field. Lin En stretched out his right hand and snapped his fingers, and a huge blue planet appeared in front of Anthony. Due to the limited understanding of the situation of the entire continent, most areas are covered by thick clouds. But this is obviously not the point. After Lin En's voice fell, countless materialized magnetic lines extended from the north and south poles, drawing beautiful arcs, like a big net wrapping the entire planet in the center. Anthony stared at the huge star under his feet, shocked and speechless. At this moment, he no longer cared to delve into why the continent was a sphere, and asked in astonishment, "So the continent under our feet is a huge magnet? So everything is attracted to the surface?" Anthony immediately remembered the theory of charged elements that Table had mentioned to him. Doesn't this just explain the phenomenon that things fall to the surface? No, that's actually the effect of the planet's gravity, Lin En said with a smile. But magnetism and gravity are indeed very similar in some aspects. Lin En used the huge planet as a blueprint to explain to Anthony the mysteries of electricity and magnetism, from magnetic lines of force, magnetization to electromagnetic induction, and then to the mutual influence and conversion of electric and magnetic fields, as the basic constituent elements of the universe. It involves electromagnetic phenomena in the quantum field, which I am afraid I can't finish talking about for days and nights. Sound, electricity, magnetism, light, color, heat transfer, thermal radiation, chemical reactions, and even the formation of life, all come from electromagnetic force in the final analysis. In any branch field, a person may not be able to study it thoroughly even if he spends his whole life exploring it. This is also the reason why Lin En did not cling to this knowledge and develop related magic on his own. After all, it is a foolish dream for him to summarize and organize the crystallization of thousands of years of human wisdom, combine it with magic, and deduce it to a higher level. Whether it is the development of science or magic, it is not something that can be accomplished by one person. Although most of the content explained by Lin En is electromagnetic phenomena in the macroscopic field, and has not yet involved the more profound electromagnetic quantum theory, it is particularly shocking to Anthony. Originally, Anthony thought that his understanding of thunder was profound enough, but only the most critical cause was not understood. However, after Lin En's explanation, he was shocked to find that his knowledge reserve was so shallow. Electrons, electric charges, alternating current, direct current, and constant magnetic field, alternating magnetic field, pulsating magnetic field. All these concepts and terms rushed into his brain, making Anthony feel ashamed of his research over the years. Although he created many powerful thunder magics, discovered the phenomenon of electricity generating magnetism, and even created alchemical runes that can induce electromagnetism, his understanding of thunder and lightning is undoubtedly superficial. Mr. Lin, I wonder which master or a legendary wizard is the research result of these theories? Anthony asked curiously. The development of electromagnetism is not the result of the efforts of one or two people, but the joint research result of many scholars in the secret society. Lin began to talk. For example, Master Faraday, who discovered the electromagnetic induction phenomenon, Master Ampere, who measured the direction of magnetic flux lines, Master Millikan, who used the oil drop method to measure the amount of electron charge, etc. In order to fit the identity of a wizard, the stories of these sages were tampered with by Lin En to another appearance. Anthony was fascinated just by listening to them, and he wished he could join them and discuss and study the mysteries of the electromagnetic field with these masters. However, what surprised him was that Lin did not mention his own contribution, but he had such a deep understanding of the development of electromagnetism and many inside stories. This is obviously very abnormal. Magic doctrines and theories are so valuable that no one will pass on all their research to another person without reservation, unless it is a master or apprentice inheritance, academic exchanges between the same level, or for other purposes. For example, just now Lin En explained to him many theories and phenomena of electromagnetism, but still avoided talking about many key issues, and spoke very vaguely. Of course, Anthony could see that these were all hooks, but his thirst for knowledge had made him unable to care so much. Even if it was wrapped in a poison, he wanted to taste the sugar coating first. Lin En talked for a long time, and after mobilizing Anthony's emotions, he took out his trump card. There are many theories that describe electromagnetism, but in general, they can all be summarized in this Olympiad equation system. The moment Lin En's voice fell, extremely bright spots of light lit up in the void, and they gradually gathered together, outlining 4 mathematical equations composed of letters and symbols. They are Gauss's law that describes how electric charges generate electric fields, Gauss's magnetic law that discusses the non-existence of magnetic monopoles, Maxwell-Ampere's law that describes how electric currents and time-varying electric fields generate magnetic fields, and Faraday's law of induction that describes how time-varying magnetic fields generate electric fields. This formula can be said to be the culmination of everything. It unifies electricity and magnetism in a nearly perfect way, predicts that light is an electromagnetic wave, and lays the foundation of electromagnetism. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237. Anthony, could it be that you are Lynn Maxwell? This is the answer to electricity and magnetism. I call it Maxwell's equations. Lin En's indifferent voice echoed beyond time and space. Anthony stared at the series of complex mathematical formulas in front of him, recording them firmly in his mind. Without annotations and explanations, he could not tell what each symbol represented, but the precise mathematical formulas in Lin En's words made him firmly believe that it must contain the most profound electromagnetic theory. Maxwell's equations. Anthony whispered softly. He knew that there was no free lunch in the world, and now it was time for him to pay. However, Anthony could not imagine what knowledge he had mastered that could match the final answer of electromagnetic magic. Is it the formula for converting magic power into lightning, or the experience of studying thunder magic, or the alchemical runes that can induce lightning and magnetism? Anthony fell into deep confusion. How could he show off such a shallow thing? The other party would only know more deeply than him. Another thing he valued the most was the entire wizard school, but if you think about it, you will know that the Secret Law Society only recruits elites and does not look down on his apprentices at all. Anthony thought about it, and finally, as if he suddenly thought of something, his eyes burst into a brilliant light, and he immediately fell in front of Lin En, and said in a trembling voice, "I have no way to repay your selfless teaching. Please allow me to become your disciple and learn the secrets of electromagnetic magic with you." Lin En was completely stunned. He used Maxwell's equations as bait to exchange for Anthony's research results on thunder magic. After all, the other party has developed six-ring thunder magic, and he must have his own unique insights into the conversion principle of magic and electromagnetic. But he didn't expect that Anthony, an old man, would have the idea of worshipping him as his teacher. Lin En didn't know that after seeing the Faraday cage, the principle of thunder generation and the magnetic field of the planet, Anthony no longer had any confidence in his research results. In addition to the equivalent exchange, the only thing Anthony could think of to make the other party continue to explain to him was the master-disciple inheritance. As for the age issue, Anthony would not judge people by appearance. He knew that some powerful witches usually used unicorn blood and magic kuiwa juice to brew a special alchemical potion to keep their appearance in the best condition. So Anthony guessed that the other party was most likely a great wizard with the art of maintaining his youth, or even a legendary wizard who liked to pretend to be young. After all, knowledge reserves cannot be faked. and the wizard in front of him has the authority to control the projection of this universe. So Anthony had a bold idea in his mind. The other party was the key figure who summarized the electromagnetic theory, one of the senior members of the Secret Law Society, Lin Maxwell. Only the proposer of this theory is qualified to teach this equation representing electromagnetic magic to another person. It was because of this that Anthony did not hesitate to throw away the so-called face and asked to become the other party's disciple. Perhaps in his lifetime, he still has the hope of breaking through the six-ring wizard and even glimpsing a higher level, the legendary realm. After a brief surprise, Lin En quickly recovered. He neither agreed nor refused, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. It's too early to talk about this now. When you have learned all these Olympiad knowledge, we can talk about it. This is the basis for learning Maxwell's equations. As Lin En spoke, countless light spots appeared again in the void, turning into a large number of complicated symbols and formulas. Solid geometry formulas, curve equations, limit calculations, countless calculus equations and theorems almost covered every corner around. Yes, the prerequisite for learning Maxwell's equations is calculus, which is also the trap that Lin En deliberately set before, using the lofty electromagnetic equations as bait. If the other party wants to learn, he must start with calculus first, which is a long process, and he can use this to exchange for the other party's research results over the years. When Anthony really starts to learn Maxwell's equations, his own strength has been improved to another level, so he doesn't care. But the other party is very sensible, and Lin En doesn't mind speeding up the process. Lin En's mind moved, and these equations suspended in the void rushed towards Anthony, turning into light spots and merging into his body. He was ready to make a try. Anthony immediately sensed that something was hitting his brain. After hesitating for a while, he released the mental protection he had built. A large amount of unfamiliar knowledge immediately flooded into his mind. For a moment, Anthony was a little distracted by the impact and was completely immersed in these exquisite Olympiad formulas and symbols. Sure enough, Lin En's eyes flickered. Before, when he learned that the intelligent brain could break other people's mental protection and mobilize computing power, he was considering whether he could engrave some knowledge into the other party's mind. Now it seems that it is indeed possible. Of course, this does not mean that he can make people master certain knowledge immediately. At most it is just accelerated. Because knowing and learning are two different things, this method is only equivalent to cramming the contents of a book into the mind rigidly. If you want to understand it thoroughly, you have to study and research it slowly. About 10 minutes later, Anthony's consciousness broke free from the magic field, and the wizards of the school who were waiting nearby immediately surrounded him. Teacher ... What's wrong? Are you okay? Fulla asked with great concern. Soon after activating the ring, Anthony's expression began to change drastically, and his body was trembling slightly, which looked very wrong. I'm fine. No, very good. Anthony stood up from his seat, his face full of excitement. At this moment, he did not look like a pale-haired old man, and his whole body seemed to be filled with new vitality. Fulla and others were frightened by Anthony's excessive reaction, and then they sensed a strong wave of magic emerging from his body. Dense arcs began to appear around Anthony, and the metal products in the secret room seemed to be pulled by something, shaking rapidly and flying towards Anthony. Accompanied by a violent thunder, the iron spoon, ornaments, and sword blade began to twist and dissolve under the tens of thousands of degrees of high temperature and the effect of the magnetic field. Anthony's magic power surged, and the intensity continued to rise, even exceeding the previous level, and reached a new level. Chapter 238 Advanced Material Deconstruction Technique. At this moment, in the secret room, Fulla and others were forced into a corner by the sudden flash of thunder and the terrifying aura of Anthony. Teacher has been promoted? A wizard looked at everything in front of him in horror and said in disbelief. He knew that his teacher Anthony had been stuck in the realm of a five-ring wizard for more than 10 years. He had lamented more than once that he was over 100 years old and his physical strength and energy had reached the limit. He was afraid that there was no hope of promotion. Unexpectedly, this time, after communicating with the young-looking wizard for more than an hour through a ring, He was promoted again. Anthony had no time to pay attention to the few people. He was carefully feeling the changes in lightning and magnetic fields. In a trance, he actually felt what Lin En said. The existence of electric charge. But this thing was very strange. Anthony couldn't even tell whether it was a mass of fluid or a single element. He could only vaguely realize that it seemed to exist somewhere, but when he wanted to perceive it more deeply, the charge suddenly disappeared. Then, Anthony broke away from this strange state, and then he was shocked to find that he had been promoted to a 6th-ring Great Wizard. But in the past, he was just one step away from the final step. This initial contact gave him a glimpse of the mystery of the microscopic field, which naturally allowed him to take this last step. The thunderstorm that leaped up in the secret room soon calmed down. Fulla and others surrounded him and said in surprise, "Teacher, are you already a 6th-ring Great Wizard?" Anthony stroked his long beard lightly and nodded. "Yes, this time I discussed the secrets of thunder magic with that adult, and I gained a lot and gained some insights." Seeing that the teacher she admired actually used a respectful title, Fulla couldn't help but frown. "Is that wizard named Lin En really that powerful?" "I should have told you before, Fulla, don't be fooled by the appearance of things. Appearance is the most superficial thing," Anthony said disappointedly. After personally experiencing the magic and weirdness of electric charge, Anthony's assessment of Lin En's strength has been raised to a higher level. With such a deep understanding of electromagnetism, the other party must have reached the legendary realm. After learning that Lin En might be a legendary wizard who is quite old but likes to pretend to be young, Fulla and others quickly let go of the nausea in their hearts, and instead imagined what the legendary wizard land would look like. At the same time, thousands of miles away, in the dean's office of Yaita College, Lin En opened his eyes and withdrew from the magic field. Having successfully fooled another great wizard, Lin En was naturally in a good mood. Since he proposed the Secret Law Society, an organization that does not exist at all, although he has gained a lot of convenience, he has also gained a hidden danger. He is almost always thinking about how to make it up. Fortunately, Helram's magic field provided him with a place for gathering. Now he has pulled in Anthony's school. When the time comes, he will go to the kingdom of Hadrata and fool more wizards with academic spirit, so that the most basic framework will be built. After that, he only needs to develop slowly and he can always cope with it. Thinking of this, Lin En quickly studied another function of the magic network that he had just discovered. That is, it can engrave knowledge into the other party's mind, and by the way, it can also break the other party's mental defense without anyone noticing. Before, the intelligent brain took advantage of the gap in transmitting knowledge to speed up the progress of cracking the mental frequency. Now it can mobilize about 5% of Anthony's computing power. Don't underestimate 5%. The improvement in computing power is even more than that of the 12 3-ring wizards such as Tik and Alva combined. Lin En thought about whether to come up with a knowledge exchange function, so that more people can be included in the magic network system through this method. Detected that target number 14 has a violent mental fluctuation. Anthony has broken through. Lin En paused for a moment, and immediately had a guess. Judging from the mental power evaluation given by the intelligent brain, it should be a breakthrough from the 5th-ring wizard to the 6th ring. This is a pleasant surprise. 071. Enter overload mode. Mobilize Anthony's computing power. Lin En muttered in his heart, and the next moment the world in front of him became fantastic. The space around him was slightly distorted and deformed. Countless elements were constantly jumping around, and under the control of mental power, a gust of elemental wind was rolled up. This is the strange world perceived by the Great Wizard. Although the upper limit of the mental increase that Lin En can bear has increased a lot after breaking through the 3rd-ring wizard, the computing power of 1/20th of a 6th-ring wizard still makes his brain feel a little tingling. Lin En's mind moved, and a steel sword on the table floated up and landed in his palm. Then the fingers of his right hand condensed, and the magic power wrapped the sword body in it. Advanced material deconstruction. This is the 4th-ring magic that Lin En had just learned not long ago. It is an upgraded version of the 0-ring magic, primary material deconstruction. the most important spell position for the elemental wizard. The powerful power is enough to decompose metal creations and restore them to the most basic metal elements. After more than a month of exploration and difficult practice, Lin En finally engraved it in his sea of consciousness across levels, and had already analyzed the element of copper. Now it was the turn of iron. The steel sword suspended in the palm of his hand trembled slightly. About a minute later, a slight muffled sound sounded in the dean's office. The smooth sword body gradually began to crack and dismember. This process was extremely slow and consumed a lot of magic power. Drops of sweat emerged from Lin En's forehead. About 10 minutes later, the 1-meter-long sword body had turned into a mass of elements that were invisible to the naked eye. 96% of iron, 1% of carbon, and impurities such as silicon, phosphorus, and sulfur were mixed in it. Compared with non-metallic elements such as hydrogen, oxygen, and helium, the control difficulty of iron and copper elements is undoubtedly much higher, and the consumption has increased several times. Iron sandstorm. After adapting to it, Lin En tried this 4-ring magic that he had seen many times. The iron elements floating in the palm of his hand immediately arranged in an orderly manner, turning into countless tiny particles as fine as sand, and rolled towards the square table in front of him. It was like being thrown into a roller. When the iron sandstorm passed by, the solid mahogany square table had been twisted into scattered wood chips and residues. It can be predicted that if a person was caught in it, he would probably be beaten into minced meat in an instant. After crushing the mahogany square table into pieces, the power of the iron sandstorm did not decrease, and even had a tendency to continue to expand, pulling all the nearby chairs and tea tables in. Chapter 239 Magneto Lin. The dean's office was already a mess. Lin En hurriedly stopped the supply of magic power. The storm immediately dissipated, and fine iron sand fell to the ground, making a series of clicking and clicking sounds. The magic power consumed is about 6 scales. Lin En sensed the magic power reserves in his body and immediately came to a conclusion. This is the case with ready-made iron elements, but if it relies entirely on magic mimicry, it will be more than 30 magic scales, which is a relatively standard magic consumption of a 4-ring spell. In other words, with his current identity as a 3-ring wizard, in the best condition, the limit is to release 3 4-ring magics, and this is still under the condition that the intelligent brain bears part of the computing power and magic consumption. This is still the case when the magic power he possesses far exceeds that of wizards of the same level. If it is an ordinary 3-ring wizard, even if all the magic power is exhausted, it may not be able to successfully cast a 4-ring magic. It can be seen that there is a qualitative gap between the former wizard and the great wizard. Lin En shook his head. Although his strength has been improved fast enough, with the help of spirit fusion and the fusion potion of Eye of Death, it only took about a year to jump to the 3rd-ring wizard. But this is obviously not enough to face the increasingly complex situation. From a former wizard to a great wizard, the fastest record in the entire wizard land is 4 years. However, the record holder, August, has been hammered for fraud and his reputation has been ruined. He can't be used as a reference at all. Fortunately, Lin En has his own cheating method. With the help of the computing power improvement brought by the magic network, he can do many things that only great wizards can do in advance, such as casting 4-ring magic, and using magic to mimic metal elements. This is unprecedented for the training of mental power. In the past 3 months, Lin En's mental power evaluation and the total amount of magic power have increased a lot. The most important thing is that after adapting to this state, there will be no obstacles to the promotion to a great wizard. What he lacks now is accumulation, and he doesn't know if he can catch up with the day when the war between the wizard land and the church breaks out. Lin En quickly adjusted his mindset and began to study how to continue to improve the lethality of these spells. Among the magics he has mastered now, the most destructive one is space vibration. However, without Aurora's spell blessing, it can only be used to deal with enemies within 5 meters of him. Otherwise the power will be greatly reduced and will no longer be able to threaten a great wizard. And Iron Sandstorm is a supplement to the medium-range offensive means. There are many variants of this spell. In addition to turning into an iron sand meat grinder like this, It can also create a large number of iron thorns like Helram. In the final analysis, it is just a means of controlling iron elements. Everyone's spell model and constructed spell slots are slightly different. It just depends on how to use them. What can cooperate with metals such as iron and copper elements is naturally electricity and magnetism. If it can be mixed with thunder magic, it should be able to greatly increase the power of iron sandstorm. The feeling of being caught in an electrified meat grinder must be very sour. Later, the iron sand can be manipulated by the electric and magnetic fields caused by the current, and a second or even third attack can be carried out, making it impossible to defend against it. Isn't that Magneto? Lin En immediately thought of a movie character from an ancient period, and then looked at a small generator placed in the corner, which was reproduced using the magnet given to him by Cody. For formal wizards who cannot sense electric charge and magnetic field, a shortcut to learning thunder magic is to receive electrotherapy. Lin En's face was a little tangled. Whether to be electrified or not is a question worth pondering. Compared with Abel and others who can only store the high-voltage lightning on thunderstorm days and weaken it into the body through protective magic, he can create current by himself and control the intensity. When he is electrocuted, there is no danger. Under the temptation of controlling electromagnetic force, Lin En only hesitated for a few seconds, and then lifted the generator with the mage's hand. In the next few days, Lin En spent his time practicing magic and receiving electrotherapy. Occasionally, he entered the magic field to explain the difficult problems of calculus to Anthony, and also learned a lot of tips for practicing thunder magic from Anthony. Normally, it usually takes 3 to 4 months, or even more than half a year, from receiving electric therapy to initially mastering magic mimicry lightning. But Lin En only took 4 days. Because he was electrocuted at least dozens of times a day, he was trembling all day. According to the data in the intelligent brain, the safe current that the human body can accept is only 10 milliamperes, and the safe voltage it can withstand is 36 volts. However, after experiencing it personally, Lin En found that the wizard's physical fitness is very strong, and coupled with the resistance brought by the magic power in the cells, it can almost withstand hundreds of volts of high-voltage electricity without damage. Not only that, his resistance to electric current is still continuing to increase, which means that magic is gradually becoming familiar with the new power of lightning. The various industries of Yaita Harbor are also developing rapidly. Every 3 days, the aerospace airship will transport batches of scarce ores to the square, and then the alchemy car will pull them to various workshops. The entire Yaita is like a huge war machine. Everyone is a part, assembling and producing war supplies continuously. With sufficient materials, the musket workshop expanded several times in a row, and produced a full 1,500 finished muskets in 1 month, which was 3 times his previous estimate. When Lin En heard Philip's report, he was stunned. He almost suspected that the other party was fooling him, or that the Alchemy Research Institute had developed some new magic. For example, put the manufacturing materials of a musket into a certain alchemy array, and then clap your hands, and the thing will be made. It was not until he went to the workshop to check it out in person that Lin En realized that he had underestimated the enthusiasm of those poor people for work. These people worked almost 16 hours a day, without taking a break in the middle, and worked whenever they woke up. You must know that the number of people recruited by each workshop is limited, and there are countless poor people outside who want to replace them and get this job. Lin En hesitated for a long time, and finally just forced them to sleep, eat and rest for 10 hours a day, and take a day off every half a month, so as not to be overwhelmed by the high-intensity work. With the current productivity of the Yaita Harbor, it is far from being luxurious enough to consider human rights. Having food to eat, a place to live and being safe are the greatest happiness in this era. Chapter 240. The more you show off your strength, the weaker you appear. A week passed in a flash, just as the Yaita Harbor was developing rapidly. In a secret basement in the capital of Hadrata, William was shaking a scarlet wine glass in his hand and listening to his subordinates' reports. "My lord, the fleet you sent to explore the Sea of Mist has returned. According to their description, the fog there seems to have some new changes. The visibility is much higher than before, and the wind and waves on the sea do not seem to be as strong as before. A tall and thin man knelt on the ground and respectfully told William the information he had investigated. For sailors like them who often sail on the sea, the horror of the Sea of Mist is naturally clear. When the fog is the thickest, the visibility is even less than 1 meter. This means that on the same ship, the sailors can only see themselves surrounded by a strange white fog. They can't see the ship under their feet, let alone their companions. The only thing they can feel is that they are drifting with the shaking of the ship, moving deeper into the fog. Anyone would have the illusion that they were heading to hell, but this time was different. The 3 fleets that went to explore the Sea of Misty Sea were originally prepared to sacrifice, but they all came back alive, and brought a shocking news. The fog in the Sea of Misty Sea seemed to be slowly dissipating, and now the visibility in the fog has exceeded 6 meters. Listening to the report from his men, William narrowed his eyes and paused in shaking the wine glass. "Sir, could there be something wrong with the wizard land?" the tall and thin man asked cautiously. "It's very likely." William's mind was full of thoughts. During this period of time, the boatmen who were stranded in Yaita have been sent back one after another, and the content of the reports to him was mostly about how rapidly the Yaita harbor has developed, which was full of praise, so much so that he began to wonder if these people were under a strange visual witchcraft, or were lying to him. Sometimes, the more you try to show off your strength, the weaker you become. A sarcastic smile appeared on William's lips. From the description of those boatmen, he also discovered an important message, that is, the wizard city Greenreel had a civil strife not long ago, and Lin En made a lot of contributions in that civil strife, and then became the ruler of the Yaita port. The current situation of the Sea of Mist is likely related to that civil strife. Now the reports of those fleets undoubtedly prove this point. The other party changed the trade from sea transportation to airships just to cover it up. "Lord William, what should we do now?" Cody couldn't help asking. William's eyes flickered, and he didn't respond for a long time. "This news is undoubtedly very important, and I'm afraid it can't be concealed for too long. The scope of the Sea of Mist is so large, and the situation at sea is so bad and changeable. Almost every year, a fleet will mistakenly enter it. If you are lucky enough not to go deep into it, and don't encounter a storm or the eye of death, there will be a small probability of being able to come out alive. This year, the situation is different. Since their fleet can return safely, others must be no exception. It only takes one opportunity for people's fear of the Sea of Mist to be completely broken. He can't imagine what will happen next. The Holy See will never miss the opportunity to completely eradicate these wizards." William's face changed again and again. He was unwilling to give up the huge profits brought by trade every year, but he also knew that once the war started, the land of wizards would most likely be destroyed. After all, if these wizards have the ability to compete with the Holy See, why would they hide on a small island outside the Sea of Mist? The trusted subordinates gathered in the basement were also whispering. In the Sekka's empire, everyone knows the horror of the Holy See. They used to work for him in a situation that was hidden and safe enough. Now there have been some great changes in the land of wizards. Even the most important barrier, the Sea of Mist, is about to disappear. This has to make them have strange ideas. Some people even suggested whether to report this news to Cardinal Lozak. If they could follow the clues and even lead the Vatican's fleet through the foggy sea to find the island, they would have made great contributions, enough to offset their mistakes, and even be granted a title to become a powerful Grand Duke. This temptation made William's balance slightly shaken. On one hand, there was a huge profit of thousands of imperial gold coins per week, but it could be overturned at any time. On the other hand, there was the reward from the Vatican, an opportunity to become a great noble of the empire without having to hide in the future. William kept shaking the wine glass in his hand, and the scarlet liquid in it fluctuated like his mood. "Cody, do you know how many wizards Lord Lin has transported to the capital by airship in recent days, and what they are doing?" "Regarding the transportation of goods, a man named Lao is now in charge. Lord Lin does not allow us to interfere. Even the servants who stay in the manor are restricted for various reasons. So until now, Their number and personnel composition are still unknown. I only know that each freight shipment is about 3 to 5 days apart, Cody said hesitantly. In addition, they have taken over part of the glass trade and now seem to be in contact with some nobles. William sneered. It seems that the new controller of Yaita is not ready to trust him at all. The shaking wine glass in his hand paused, and then William suddenly drank the scarlet liquid inside and said coldly, "Send more people, starting from today, monitor their movements in the capital, and find out what these wizards want to do. Also, I need to know everything they do in the manor, so I will send someone in to check it out in the name of the profit-sharing negotiation." "I understand," Cody replied with his head down. "Sir William, do you need to meet with the cardinal first?" a boatman with a rat-like face suddenly asked. "No, it's not the right time yet." William shook his head. He didn't have enough chips in his hand. The compass that can locate the wizard's land has been taken back by Lin En, which means that they have now lost the ability to find the island in the sea. If there is not enough merit to offset the previous fault, then after losing its value, the final outcome will be obvious. So they must get more information now, at least to confirm when the airship will stop in the manor. There will definitely be a way to locate the wizard's land. If they can take advantage of this time to make a cut with these wizards, it would naturally be great. Chapter 241, The Musketeers and the Approaching War. Unconsciously, summer has arrived. The scorching sun hangs high in the sky. The scorching heat bakes the 3,000 soldiers standing on the training ground. The big beads of sweat keep flowing down from their foreheads and seeping into their collars. Their whole bodies are wet and uncomfortable, but no one dares to move. Old York has been standing on the training ground for 2 hours. There is no pain in his whole body, but he still grits his teeth and persists. It was not until noon that the whistle for rest sounded, and he breathed a sigh of relief. However, he had no time to rest at all. Instead, he hurriedly ran and lined up in a long line to get today's lunch: 2 pieces of white bread, a small pot of vegetable soup, plus a palm-sized grilled fish, or an equal amount of camel meat. For Old York, this is a happy luxury. Although the monthly salary of joining the Musketeers is a full 20 silver coins, they are reluctant to eat such luxurious things on weekdays. Only here can they have 3 meals a day, with meat provided for every meal. They usually eat 2 meals or even 1 meal. Old York, do you think the city lord has suddenly called so many people for training? Is there going to be a war? During the break, a tall and strong man patted his shoulder and couldn't help asking. This is a rumor that has been circulating all over the Yaita harbor recently. Almost everyone with a little IQ can see that a war is approaching. After all, Yaita used to only have some security teams to manage it. Now suddenly recruiting 3,000 people to form a musket team, the meaning is already very clear. I guess so. Old York bit the white bread in his mouth and muttered, feeling a little uneasy. They have not experienced the so-called war in the wizard land, but every Sunday, the boatmen who arrived in Yaita from the outside world would always squander copper coins in the tavern and complain to them about their depression in the outside world. In the Seka's Empire, whether you are farming or working as a laborer, you must hand over a portion of the small amount of compensation you get to the local church to repent for the mistakes you have made in the past year, and then you have to pay taxes to the so-called nobles. In the end, only 2 or 3/10 of it really belong to you. This made the residents of the harbor town more convinced that the outside world was a barbaric hell. If they lost this war, their families would be brutally killed by the enemy, their land would be taken away, and their property would be looted. Old York, who had just seen some hope in life, naturally did not want everything he had worked hard to get to be taken away, so he was particularly serious in his daily training. But what confused him was that these training programs were really too strange. All they had to do every day was to run around the city a few times, shout slogans, or stand in the sun for a few hours, or hold a mallet with a long knife on the top and stab a dummy for more than an hour. The strangest thing was that they were required to make their beds neatly and get up immediately whenever they heard the whistle. They had to gather at the training ground within the specified time. The queue could not be disordered at all, otherwise the whole team would be punished. These strange rules made Old York and others complain bitterly. In their opinion, These trainings were useless and were just torturing themselves. It was heard that in a while, the wizards were going to catch a few earth giants and let them deal with them in the form of 8-man teams to hone their courage and ability. Isn't this making things difficult for people? Old York took a bite of white bread and complained in his heart. As a hunter, he knew how difficult these monsters were to deal with. Even if an 8-man team was fully armed and holding crossbows, at least half of them would be killed or injured to win, and the greater possibility was that the whole army would be wiped out. After about an hour of rest, the shrill whistle sounded again. Old York immediately got up from the ground and found his position in the queue in less than half a minute. Generally speaking, the afternoon is the time for stabbing practice, but this time it was different. Their Lord Mayor, Lin En, the actual controller of Yida, also arrived at the training ground. For a moment, Old York and others felt that their waists and legs were no longer sore, and they stood straighter than each other. Their instructor Rowan did not give them those things that looked like mallets, but a strange long stick with exquisite workmanship and a shining bayonet on the top. Is this a spear? Old York was confused. The wooden target in front was also covered with a layer of armor, probably to simulate those fully armed enemies. Soon the Lord Mayor told them that this thing was called a musket, a creation of the alchemy workshop, and a second-generation product that had been improved. He also personally taught them how to use this new flintlock. The guards of the musket team were shaking with excitement, but they still mastered the use of this thing in more than half an hour. The first 300 people, stand out, place the ammunition, aim at the target in front, keep your body balanced, and pull the trigger, Rowan shouted loudly. Old York immediately took 2 steps forward, and put the round lead bullet into the gun chamber with a slightly unfamiliar look, and then aimed at the target about 10 meters away, and pulled the trigger according to Rowan's instructions. Then a thunder-like sound rang in his ears, and the unprepared Old York only felt his ears buzzing, and then he fell to the ground under the strong recoil. Thunder, thunder, accompanied by a series of thunderous gunshots. The 300 people standing neatly in the front row on the training ground suddenly became scattered. About a quarter of them were knocked to the ground by the recoil because they were unprepared, and several people were stimulated by the sudden explosion. They were dizzy and kept shouting thunder. Rowan's face was very ugly, and he blew the whistle immediately. The originally chaotic team immediately quieted down as if by reflex, and Old York and others subconsciously jumped up and stood back in their original positions. Only then did Old York notice that the target in front of them had been broken into pieces, and even the solid armor was directly pierced. The powerful power made everyone stunned. Many people only now remembered that Lin En had just told them that this thing was a creation of the alchemy workshop, which means that it may contain the magic of the wizards, such as the power of thunder and fire gathered in this musket, which has such a powerful power. Chapter 242 Lin En's Superior Firepower Theory. On the training ground, a series of piercing roars rang out, cleaning the gun barrel, inserting lead bullets, loading gunpowder, aiming at the target, pulling the trigger. The guards strictly followed the procedures, and fired lead bullets one by one under Rowan's scolding, and soon the targets in front of them were smashed to pieces. In the end, Rowan had to replace all the targets with steel ones, otherwise they would not be able to withstand the tossing. This training lasted for an entire afternoon. Although the recoil of the musket made his palms and shoulders hurt a little, the novelty brought by this thing made Old York completely ignore the physical discomfort, and he wished he could shoot here all day and night. Even after hearing Rowan say that the shooting practice was over and they could rest, the new recruits were somewhat reluctant to leave. Old York took advantage of the rest time to take a look at the steel target stand, and couldn't help but take a breath of cold air. The copper shield, which was 2 fingers thick, had been hit by lead bullets and had pits, and the surface was directly sunken inward. Obviously, even steel cannot completely resist the attack of muskets, and armor will be shattered in an instant if it hits a person. Old York shuddered. He couldn't imagine it. After a while of rest, it was time for the usual jogging. 3,000 people carried new muskets and lined up in a long queue to jog around the entire city. The townspeople on the street cast envious eyes. Everyone knows that the best treatment in the entire Ida seaport is the musket team. Not only does it pay 20 silver coins a month, but it also provides free food and accommodation. It's a pity that the musket team is very strict in recruiting people. Those who are too fat, too thin, too short, and too old are not accepted. Old York enjoyed the envious and jealous eyes of the crowd and hugged the flintlock in his hand tightly. If these people knew that the city lord actually gave each of them a powerful alchemical weapon that could penetrate steel protective gear, they would be envious. Master Lin, is it really useful to have them do these basic Q training all the time? Luo Wen asked in confusion as he looked at the receding figures of these recruits. He felt that instead of spending so much time studying how to arrange the square formation meticulously and how to maintain the neatness of the formation while running, it would be better to spend all the time practicing the accuracy of shooting, which is more important on the battlefield. Of course, I have always believed that one of the most important criteria for a qualified army is to obey orders, Lin En said firmly. Especially the musket team, it must maintain a strict queue to exert its greatest power. In the era when flintlock rifles were popular, the most famous was the linear infantry tactics nicknamed queue and shoot. The accuracy and range of early muskets were limited. Only by queuing up in formation and firing concentrated fire could the ammunition still have sufficient accuracy at a long distance. Of course, Lin En did not intend to do this, because his opponent was not equipped with muskets and artillery, but was prepared to use the famous three-stage shooting method to make up for the poor firing rate of flintlock rifles. The so-called three-stage shooting is to divide the firearms troops into 3 rows, front and back, and fire in turn. After the first row finishes shooting, they retreat to the third row to reload ammunition, and the second row of musketeers who are ready can start shooting, and so on, so that the rain of bullets will continuously attack the enemy. At this time, discipline is very important, otherwise they will only lose their composure during the battle. Lin En explained to Rowan the combat methods of the musketeers, and then asked curiously, "What is your impression of war? What are the factors that determine the outcome of a war?" Rowan also came from the Misty Sea. It is said that he had been a knight in a certain earldom for a period of time and led several small-scale wars. Later, he fled all the way to the land of wizards because he was reported and exposed for self-taught witchcraft. It was precisely because of his experience in leading troops that Lin En asked him to lead the musketeers. Rowan spoke while thinking about the so-called three-stage shooting method. Normally, the army is divided into 2 types. One type is the temporary conscripted serfs, holding pitchforks, hoes and other farm tools. They are numerous but have very limited combat capabilities. The other type is the well-equipped and well-trained elite guards, who are usually used as the finale. When the war begins, they usually set up a formation, shoot a few rounds of arrows first, and then everyone takes up knives to chop each other. The side that collapses first loses. Normally, the factors that determine victory or defeat are the number of troops, the armor rate, the number of bows and crossbows, and the number of knights. Rowan talked incessantly. Of course, this is a civil war between nobles for land. Generally speaking, the church will not interfere, otherwise, it will be another situation if the priests or even bishops take action. Is it so primitive? Lin En paused for a moment, and then remembered that if the divine arts and magic are put aside, this is a medieval empire. The battles between nobles are usually only a few thousand people. What new tactics can be done? After introducing the war between nobles, Rowan talked about his use and understanding of firearms. For example, when there are fewer enemies in front of you, you can surround them in a circular formation, crossfire, and form a firepower network to improve shooting accuracy. Compared with bows and crossbows, the strength of flintlock rifles lies in their armor-piercing ability and the speed of personnel training. Their disadvantages are slow loading speed and weak close combat ability. After all, bayonets are not as easy to use as giant swords or spears, so you may need to train 1,000 sword and shield soldiers to assist the musket team in close combat. There is no need for that. Bayonets will only be used in a worst situation, since close combat is weak. Isn't it better to prevent the enemy from getting close? Lin En interrupted. Lord Lin En, war is no joke. The number of any punitive army of the empire may be more than 10 times ours. It is impossible to defeat them with just a few rounds of musket shooting. Rowan frowned. He felt that Lin En's confidence in muskets was a bit too great. No, it is precisely because our army is too small that we can't waste it on close combat, which means a large reduction in personnel. Lin En shook his head. With superior firepower, this is how we should fight. Use the field of vision provided by the airship to attack the enemy when they are between 3 kilometers and 300 meters away. Use magic to carry out bombardment between 370 meters. Within 70 to 10 meters, use muskets to fire in turns, and try to eliminate the enemy outside our field of vision. Within 10 meters, we will decide whether to use Flame Torrent to attack the enemy or use Earth Wall to assist in their retreat, depending on the enemy's resistance. Chapter 243. Our goal is to end every war with 0 casualties. Lin En's battle plan was very simple, which was to use superior firepower to defeat or cripple them before the two sides formally came into contact. Never give the other side a chance to get close to you. My goal for you is to end every battle with 0 casualties, Lin En said decisively. 0 casualties? Rowan was stunned. No one who had been in contact with war would say such a stupid thing, but after carefully thinking about Lin En's tactics, Rowan suddenly realized that it seemed possible. He had seen the thing called artillery in the Alchemy Research Institute. Although its power was not as strong as the magic crystal cannon, its range was much longer, and the most important thing was that it could be mass-produced quickly. The only trouble was that artillery usually required some basic mathematical knowledge, and they could only select suitable personnel from the wizard apprentices first, and it had not been formed until now. If there were 100 such artillery pieces, a burst of bombardment, and without the interference of enemies at the level of the cardinal, it would really be possible to eliminate the opponent outside the field of vision. Rowan couldn't help but feel that war could be fought like this. But what if the enemy sends cavalry to flank us? After hesitating, Rowan quickly thought of the loopholes in this tactic and asked anxiously. Lin En looked at Rowan with strange eyes and said speechlessly, "What do you think our alchemical armored vehicles are used for?" Yes, Rowan suddenly realized that they still had this big killer, and his expression immediately became excited. In his mind, he imagined the scene of the enemy's cavalry rushing over and then being crushed into debris by the fast-moving alchemical armored vehicles. In this way, at least we don't have to worry too much about the front battlefield. Rowan's heart, which had been hanging, was immediately put down. Before, when he learned that the wizard land was going to go to war with the church, Rowan was so worried that he couldn't sleep all night. After all, the gap in conventional strength was too big. Now it seems that the situation is not that bad. Lin En is not so optimistic, because all these assumptions are based on the situation that the enemy is an ordinary army. In this world with divine arts and magic, anything can happen. Just thinking about it, Lin En's expression suddenly paused. His brows slightly frowned, as if sensing something. "Lord Lin, what's wrong?" Rowan asked cautiously. "It's about the intelligence of the kingdom of Hadratha." Lin's eyes flickered. At the beginning, he took advantage of the gap when William's trusted men stayed in Yaida, and arranged a hidden player among these people. Although William was indeed very resourceful, these boatmen could only be described as loyal and their families were also held hostage. But the so-called loyalty is often just that the chips for betrayal are not enough. He offered a price that the other party could not refuse at all, but he did not expect that it would come into play so soon. "Just as I thought, that William is indeed not very peaceful. He has discovered the abnormality of the Sea of Mist." Lin continued to speak. Rowan's heart, which had just been put down, was lifted up again in an instant. He hurriedly asked about the whole story and whether the war was going to start immediately. Lin shook his head. William should not report it before he got the method to locate the wizard's land. Otherwise, he would die 100 times for smuggling supplies to the wizard's land. But this trouble has been delayed for so long, and it's time to deal with it. At the same time, in a manor outside the capital of Hadratha, Cody walked into the wizard's base camp with trepidation. He came with William's mission, but Cody himself did not hold much hope for this, because even the servants in the manor were under surveillance and could not get any intelligence, which showed that these wizards had been prepared for a long time. Sure enough, after entering the manor this time, the wizard named Orlando did not allow him to wander around, but took him directly to the reception room. Cody could only bite the bullet and negotiate with the other party on the issue of profit sharing. Orlando and others had made a concession before, and now the old matter was brought up again, and it would be good if he was not directly expelled. However, what he did not expect was that although Orlando and others reacted very strongly, they focused on discussing the balance of risks and benefits. Could it be that, as Lord William said, there was a big mess in the wizard's land, and now they can't do without them at all? Cody thought to himself, and Loud's face suddenly changed, and then he said directly, I need to discuss this with William in person. But Lord William has been seriously ill recently, and it's not convenient for him to go out now. Cody shook his head and refused. Since he still cares about whether he has earned enough imperial gold coins, it seems that he is not seriously ill enough, Lord said sarcastically. Cody's expression was also a little embarrassed, but he still forced himself to calm down and said that he needed to ask for instructions before making a decision. Watching Cody leave, the expressions of everyone present became a little worried, and Lin's figure also appeared in the reception room. Lord Lin, do you think William will agree? Lord asked hesitantly. Why not? He can't get any useful information from other places, Lin said with a smile. Perhaps because the work he did was not allowed to be seen in the light. William was very cautious on weekdays. For some reason, he had not left his bunker for the past 2 years. Even few people have seen his true face. Most people only know that William, the Viscount of the Kingdom, is a kind-looking fat man who runs a fleet trade, that's all. More importantly, that place is not far from the church's headquarters, so it is difficult for them to adopt a strategy of strong attack. But what if it is a trap? Loud was a little uneasy. Of course it will be a trap. So it depends on your performance next, Loud, Lin said confidently, and then patted Loud on the shoulder and continued. You are my right-hand man, and you don't know magic. Cody also knows this information. For safety reasons, William will most likely let you go. Loud's mouth twitched. This was just out of the tiger's mouth, and into the wolf's den. However, compared to the time when he met Anthony before, Loud's fear was not so strong, because he knew that Lin could project part of his power at any time through the Ring of Mysticism. As long as William is dealt with, he can take over his power and no longer be dispensable like before. He can also become the most important right-hand man of Lord Lin. Lord silently comforted himself in his heart. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244 Lord, this is a family heirloom left by my great-grandfather. William's actions were faster than everyone imagined. Almost in the evening of the same day, Cody had already returned to the manor with the invitation letter. Since Lin En was still in the port of Yaida, the affairs of the entire capital were handed over to Lord and Orlando. Now the Holy See has set up sentries at all entrances to the capital. Lord Orlando may not be convenient to go there, so please come with me in person, Mr. Lord. The reason given by Cody was very reasonable, so reasonable that it was impossible to refuse. In that case, let's go. Lord snorted coldly, took his protective walking stick, touched the ring in his hand, and followed William's men alone and got on the carriage. Lord's courage to go to the meeting alone made Cody secretly admire him. If possible, he did not want to confront Lord Lin En. It's a pity that these wizards can't compete with the Holy See at all. They will be destroyed sooner or later. Lord William is also determined to turn to the embrace of the church. The carriage drove slowly on the uneven road. The carriage had the mark of the William family on it. It passed the city gate very smoothly and soon arrived at the door of the mansion. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary manor. Compared with the huge financial resources of its owner, it could only be described as low-key. But when he really entered it, Loud found that it was simply a small fortress with very strict guards. As William's hiding place, there might be underground palaces, tunnels, etc. Loud thought to himself that they were not just going to see William this time. It would be bad if he let the other party run away. However, just before entering the door of the fortress, a group of guards suddenly surrounded him. The leader was a man who looked like a rat. He stopped Loud and said with a smile, "Please stop first, Mr. Loud. Before meeting Lord William, there is another process. We need to confirm that you are not carrying any dangerous weapons. Are you going to search your body? Loud's face suddenly became very ugly. Do you know who I am? But your Lord, Viscount William, personally invited me here. Lord shouted angrily, and then turned to look at Cody. What does this mean? Cody's face became a little embarrassed, and he said to ease the atmosphere. Murder. This is not good, right? We have no ill intentions. We just want to ensure the safety of the conversation, that's all. The man named Murder had a smile on his face, but his mouth was in an unquestionable tone. This is also the order of Lord William. While speaking, the guards around him also surrounded him, blocking all his retreat routes. Lord was angry and furious, and his crutches and his hands slammed heavily on the ground several times, and even threatened that he would leave now. Of course there is no problem. But it's a little late now. Without our carriage to see you off, you may not be able to leave the capital. Murder said politely. Lord stared at the other party, always keeping his purpose in mind, and finally did not dare to act rashly, and said dissatisfiedly, I can guarantee that I am not carrying any dangerous weapons. Just guaranteeing is not enough. Murd shook his head and motioned the guards to come forward. Soon, they searched Laud's body and found a small crossbow, 2 daggers, and a small bag of alchemical powder that can blind people. Is this what you mean by not carrying dangerous weapons? Everyone present had strange faces. These are just some self-defense tools, not weapons for attack, Laud explained with a thick face. 2 guards on the side took his crutches and looked at them over and over again. They couldn't find the use of this thing for a long time. In addition, Laud kept emphasizing that his artificial leg was not very good. So the guards had to return it. Can I go in now? Laud took back the crutches for protection and snorted coldly. There is one more thing left. Murt's eyes quickly focused on the index finger of Laud's right hand. The ring you are wearing, if I am not mistaken, should be an alchemical item, right? The pattern on it should be more than just a decoration. This is my heirloom, passed down from my great-grandfather. It is very precious. I will never give it to anyone else. Loud held the ring tightly in his hand and said firmly, I promise you that when I leave the castle, I will return it to you intact. Mert said confidently, this is just to ensure the safety of the conversation. Safety. Loud cursed in his heart. Compared with the anger he pretended just now, he was really a little panicked now. After all, this ring of the mystic was what he really relied on. But Mert was obviously not just talking. The dozen guards around him were staring at him covetously. Their sturdy bodies and the long swords hanging on their waists were naked threats. While arguing with Mert, Loud hesitated whether to take action. He originally thought that coming alone should make the other party relax his vigilance and meet William smoothly, but he didn't expect that he had to make a life-and-death decision when he arrived at the door. Suddenly, Lin En's voice rang in his ears. Give it to him. I don't know if it's because there are other people around. Lin En's words are very concise, so he almost thought he heard it wrong. But Loud's forehead was sweating, which was inconsistent with the original plan. He knew very well that although Lin En could help him in the form of a magic incarnation, from the previous situation, he had a weakness, that is, he couldn't be too far away from the ring. He didn't know the specific range for the time being, but it should not exceed 15 meters. Once he lost the ring of the mystic, he would be in danger next, but the situation on the field obviously didn't allow him to think too much. After struggling for about 3 seconds, Loud finally handed over the ring according to Lin En's instructions. Keep it safe for me. If I find any problem with it when you come out, you're dead. Loud said viciously. Of course, I will protect it with my life, Mert said jokingly, and then stepped aside. Cody, take Mr. Loud in. Mr. Loud, please. Sir William is waiting for you inside, Cody said embarrassedly. Loud paused heavily on his cane, snorted in dissatisfaction, and then followed Cody in with a nervous mood. Chapter 245. Drink this glass of wine. You and I are still good friends. Walking through the long corridor, Loud's mood fell to the bottom. His previous plan had been completely disrupted. Lord Lin probably didn't want to alert the enemy, or he had a new idea, but it was not easy for him to deal with William alone. Fortunately, the ring was not unable to function without him. Loud could only hope that Lord Lin could find an opportunity to solve the trouble over there and come to rescue him. Now all he could do was to delay as much time as possible and take it one step at a time. Here it is. Cody led Loud to the right side of the fortress, and the heavy stone door slowly opened. Cody stayed outside the door, and Loud stepped in. The heavy stone door behind him closed immediately. Inside was a magnificently decorated hall with priceless murals on the walls and thick red carpets on the floor. The whole room was filled with luxury and aristocratic atmosphere. On the long table in the center of the hall, a variety of dishes had already been placed. They looked extremely sumptuous. If it weren't for the fully armed guards standing on both sides of the hall, he would have almost thought that the other party had really invited him to enjoy the feast. Lord's eyes gradually looked to the end of the long table and saw the owner of the manor, William. He was a fat man weighing more than 300 pounds. His white gray robe tightly wrapped his fat. His hair was as shiny as fireflies in the dark night. His eyes were narrowed into slits. His nostrils were facing the sky, and his whole body exuded a disgusting smell of alcohol. At this time, he was holding a glass of red wine in his hand and tasting it leisurely. The maid next to him was working hard to serve him. "You are finally here." William put down the goblet in his hand, stood up and clapped his hands, signaling the maids around him to step aside, and then pointed to the seat next to him. "Please take a seat, Mr. Loud." Loud seemed to have forgotten the slight unpleasantness at the door just now. He held the cane in his hand and sat down generously like an invited guest. However, he did not sit in the seat pointed by William, but in the seat opposite. William did not care. He personally scooped up a cup of scarlet wine with a wooden spoon, filled another glass, and then handed it to Loud in person, speaking slowly. "I heard that Mr. Loud also worked for Lord Herm like me, responsible for transporting goods from the Sekka's empire to the land of wizards. Is that right? It seems that you have inquired about a lot of information in Yaita." Loud did not touch the glass of wine, and was not surprised that the other party knew this. At the beginning, he followed Lin En to escape to Yaita, and caused quite a stir in Yaita. Almost everyone in the city knew about it. It was normal for William to collect relevant information and guess his identity. However, looking at William, who was so elegant and almost fat like a ball, Laud couldn't help but feel a little jealous. Although he was in charge of a large number of people when he was in the harbor town, he was not presentable at all and had to look at the faces of the nobles in the church at all times. William was obviously much better than him. Not only did he curry favor with the eldest Prince Harold, but he also became a veritable viscount. Just looking at his figure, you can tell that he enjoyed a lot in his daily life. People like us always unconsciously inquire about some information, don't we? No matter how glorious the appearance is, it's just a running dog that comes when you call and goes when you wave. William shook his head and said meaningfully. Laud could naturally understand the other party's underlying meaning, but he didn't agree with it and responded with a sneer. Who in this world is not a lackey? Even King Basil cannot decide on the choice of the crown prince, and the cardinal cannot disobey the orders of the church's top leaders. That's right. Since we are all just making a living under someone else's hands, why not change to a bigger and higher backer? William sipped the red wine in the glass and said calmly, "After all, this world belongs to the nobility and the church. All secular things belong to the king, and spirituality and faith belong to God. But the world will always change, and the speed is probably faster than you think." Loud said without comment, "Then I would like to see it." William did not care, and then asked casually, "I don't know. What methods have you thought of to deal with me?" Loud's heart skipped a beat. Things were obviously getting out of his control, but Loud still forced himself to calm down and asked in confusion, "What do you mean, William? Didn't you invite me to discuss the trade of minerals and glass products?" Before entering the door, you asked your men to take away all my self-defense supplies. Are you worried that I, a cripple who can't do magic, will do something to you? Loud stroked his right hand on his cane and sneered. "In that case, I might as well give you a way out." William got straight to the point. "I need to know how many wizards Lord Lin sent into the capital of Hajarata, and what they want to do. In addition, where is the compass that can locate the wizard's land?" William stared at Loud and questioned. The guards on both sides had drawn their long swords. After entering the hall, William had already met his swords in just 2 or 3 minutes. Loud hesitated for a long time, as if he was trying to weigh the pros and cons, and fell into deep thought, until William showed an extremely impatient look on his face, as if he had finally made a decision, and spoke suddenly. "That compass has always been in the hands of Lord Orlando." Lord said nonsense. In fact, the positioning device of the airship had long been replaced with something called a compass. Even if he got it, he had to know the specific location of the wizard's land, otherwise he would have to slowly search for it on the sea. "Then how many of you have entered the territory of the kingdom of Hadrada? Are there any great wizards, and how many official wizards are there?" William asked again. Lord thought a lot again, and then answered slowly. "About dozens of people. This is not certain. Only Lord Orlando knows the specific situation." Perhaps noticing that Lord was deliberately delaying time, William's expression became a little dangerous. He stretched out his fat index finger, pointed to the glass of red wine on the table, and said without question, "I will only give you 30 seconds to think about it. Drink that glass of wine and we will talk again." Chapter 246. Even if your head is as hard as iron, there will be a hole in it. As William opened his mouth, the guards had already surrounded him. Cold sweat broke out on Laud's forehead. These 30 seconds were undoubtedly the longest time he had ever spent. "Okay." At the last moment, Laud sighed, slowly reached out and picked up the wine glass on the table, pretending to drink it, but at the last moment, his expression suddenly changed, and he threw the red wine in the glass to the guard closest to him. The scarlet liquid immediately smeared on the man's face, sticking to his skin like sticky mud. Obviously, this was not just as simple as red wine. More than a dozen fully armed guards had already swung their knives and slashed at him. Laud ducked down and shamelessly crawled under the table to avoid the long knife, calmly analyzing the situation on the field. Although the opponent had a lot of people, they were all ordinary people, and the fat William was even more inconvenient to move. He might not have no chance. Just as he was thinking, the long table above was lifted up, and Laud could see clearly that the person who did it was William. You have to know that a whole solid wood-long table with a lot of food on it probably weighs hundreds of pounds, but William easily flipped it away. Fortunately, Laud was not an ordinary cripple. His alchemical prosthesis was even more flexible than that of a normal person. He almost rolled and crawled to avoid several long knives that were chopped at him, and rushed straight to William, who was very close to him. A fully armed guard suddenly blocked the front, and his sturdy figure was like a heavy high wall. Laud did not slow down, raised his crutches in his hand, and put his hands on the secret compartment. The next moment, a piercing thunder sounded in the closed hall. The lead bullet with a speed of more than 300 meters per second had penetrated the helmet at the moment the gunshot sounded, and the opponent's head was beaten into a ball of twist. The mincemeat mixed with blood was sprinkled on Laud's face, but he didn't care about it anymore. Before a dozen guards surrounded him, he had already pushed the crutches and muskets in his hands against William's head. "Surrender, William. You should have seen its power just now. Even if your head is as hard as steel, there will be a hole on it," Laud said viciously. Although this musket could not be fired a second time in a short period of time, it did not prevent him from using it as a threat. However, William ignored the powerful crutch musket on his head and said with disappointment, "Is this what you rely on?" Laud's heart was filled with warning signs, and then the ground under his feet collapsed. Laud did not check for a moment and lost his balance, falling in with the fat William. Laud climbed up from the ground very quickly, and after seeing the surrounding scene clearly, cold sweat broke out on his face. This is an underground palace, with densely packed holes on the walls around, and countless sharp crossbows were mounted on them. William also fell hard and could not stand up at all. He was like a different person, and said with a trembling body, "The walls of the entire hall are built with 2-meter-thick boulders. There are traps like this everywhere in the hall, and the ground is filled with kerosene. Unless a great wizard or a cardinal comes in person, no one can leave here alive." "You are not William." Lord finally realized something was wrong at this time, because the real William would never put himself in such a dangerous situation. "Unless, this is just a substitute." "Damn it." Lord immediately thought of this, and didn't expect that he would die here with a substitute. With a slight mechanical sound, The crossbow arrow mounted at the entrance of the cave retracted in. That was the sound of the string being wound. Facing thousands of dark crossbow holes around him, Lord had no choice but to close his eyes and wait for death. Even if he could fly now, he couldn't fly out. However, after waiting for a long time, there was no sound of the crossbow arrow being fired, and the two people present were both stunned. The mechanism is stopped. A few minutes ago, outside the gate of the fortress, Mert, who had confiscated Laud's belongings, walked alone deeper into the manor. After many twists and turns, he entered a hidden compartment. This was William's real hiding place. Except for a few of his confidants, no one knew that William had trained a substitute who looked very similar. He usually handled some external affairs or attended banquets among nobles. Compared with the substitute outside, the real William looked fatter and fatter, and even made people wonder whether he could breathe. "Sir, just as you expected before, Mr. Laud doesn't seem to be ready to negotiate with us properly." Mert walked forward with his eyebrows lowered and showed two daggers and a small crossbow in front of William, and said that these were all looted from Laud's body. "You did a good job, Mert," William said with appreciation. Although the intelligence indicated that Lord was just an ordinary person who could not perform magic and was not a big threat, the magic of those wizards was extremely strange. Who knew if they would set up some tricks on the other party? Naturally, he was not prepared to face them personally. "Go and call Cody. I have something to tell him," William said in a deep voice. Mert stood quietly without any intention of moving, as if he had not heard his order. William's eyes, which were not big to begin with, were almost narrowed into a line, and his pupils were filled with murderous intent. At this moment, a voice that made him extremely unfamiliar and frightened rang out in the compartment. Forked lightning, blue-purple arcs lit up around Mert. The speed of lightning was extraordinary. William had no time to react. The guards standing in front of him were already covered by the lightning. The solid iron armor not only failed to protect him, but became the best conductor. Just a face-to-face encounter, under the current of tens of thousands of volts, twitched and fell to the ground. William himself was also within the range of the thunder. Because the guards were wearing armor, the lightning conduction effect was so good that William was only slightly affected. However, the fat on his body trembled when the current passed through. Will it be affected by the conductor? This is a big disadvantage. The strange voice sounded again in the compartment, and then Lin En's figure appeared in the void. He looked at the guards who fell under the thunder magic and William who was intact. His new magic seemed to need to be improved. Chapter 247 William, oh no, I've become a substitute. Murder, how dare you betray me? The moment he saw Lin En, William understood everything, but he couldn't believe that one of his most trusted men would betray him. How could this be possible? How dare he? Have you forgotten your parents and family? Murder, they are all in my hands. William threatened fiercely. The communication eagle is not with you now. Murder responded in a low voice. As long as William died here, naturally no one would issue orders. You probably don't know that Mr. Murder actually has a very good wizard talent. Lin En smiled and said, after seeing higher scenery, how could anyone bear to lie dormant in the quagmire? Of course, he also used some extra tricks. Otherwise how could he dare to trust the enemy's trusted men? You are looking for death. William slapped the table and chair angrily, and dozens of machine amplifiers suddenly sounded, and sharp crossbow arrows flew out from the two fat feet, aiming at Lin En and others. Electromagnetic control. Lin En stretched out his hand, and the flying crossbow arrow immediately stopped in front of him. Then, bursts of lightning flashed on the iron arrowhead. Lin En stretched out his hand and flicked it. The wooden arrowhead suddenly broke apart. The iron arrowhead flew out at a faster speed and pierced into William's fat body. Exploding blood mist. William's painful wail immediately resounded in the room, but the blood mist that exploded did not fall to the ground, but surrounded his body under the gathering of some kind of power. In the waves of terrifying blood light, William's figure began to expand rapidly, and the fat on his body quickly disappeared. Finally, he turned into a blood-colored figure more than 2 meters tall and extremely strong. His red eyes exuded a breath of shocking breath, and a violent and bloodthirsty breath immediately filled the entire room. The stripped blood spontaneously formed a barrier, blocking the Chain lightning. That was coming again. Sure enough, he has some tricks, Lin En said lightly. He intentionally controlled the intensity of the electric current, but he didn't expect that the other party could block it so easily. It seems that William has been doing a lot of tricks in the past 10 years of working for Helram. Before, Lin En had always been curious about which fleet brought the statue of the evil god into the wizard's land. There was no clear record of this in the Yayata port. Now it seems that it should have been brought in from the fleet of Hadrata. Mert was also very surprised by William's sudden outburst. This was information that even he didn't know, so he hurriedly reminded him. Lord Lin En, since 5 years ago, William has been brewing and taking a strange red wine. I suspect that it may be mixed with the blood of some kind of monster. Traitor. When William heard Mert's words, his eyes were full of bloodlust, and he rushed towards the two like a huge bull. White phosphorus, hand of the flame demon. Lin En did not use the electromagnetic magic that he had just mastered and was not very proficient in. The scorching fire stream surged out from his palm and swallowed William in an instant. The blood-colored barrier surrounding his body became the best fuel at this moment. The fierce white phosphorus fire was like a maggot on the tarsal bone. It quickly broke through the barrier and turned William into a torch. However, William still ignored it and endured the pain of being roasted by the flames and his flesh being torn and swallowed. He had only one thought in his mind, that is, to kill the two people in front of him. Unfortunately, this was just a luxury. The next moment, the fire beam gushing out of Lin En's palm suddenly turned into an extremely cold current, liquid nitrogen, ice storm. William immediately experienced what it meant to be in the world of ice and fire. His already blurred flesh and blood burst into pieces, quickly disintegrated, and turned into tiny pieces of ice slag that fell to the ground. The short distance of 4 or 5 meters was like a natural chasm. William finally fell down, in front of Lin, as if he had rushed all the way here just to pay a great tribute. Mert looked at William with pity. He could naturally see that the other party's fat body should be the side effect of some strange ritual. The power obtained was undoubtedly powerful, but in front of a real wizard, it still looked so ridiculous. This also proved that his choice was correct. Good physical fitness, Lin praised, and then ignored William's bloody body and pressed his magic palm on the other party's head. Soul search, because it was just an incarnation. Lin En could only mobilize limited mental power, but William was tortured to the point of mental disorder, so without spending too much effort, Lin En had successfully obtained the information he wanted. The stimulation brought by the invasion of the mind also made William wake up from the pain of being roasted by flames and attacked by ice, and he shouted frantically, "Wait, you must not kill me. Every one of my trusted subordinates knows the information about the Sea of Mist. If I die, they will definitely spread this news. I don't want the share of the trade in freight. I'll give it to you, all of it. Don't worry so much, William." Lin En's mouth curled up a smile. "Don't you have a good substitute? I think he will definitely live well for you." William's pupils shrank, but before he could say anything, the whole person was frozen into an ugly ice sculpture. "Lord Lin En, there is a secret passage leading directly to the hall. Mr. Loud should be there," Mert said very earnestly. "Let's go. Don't let him wait." Lin nodded. Although Mert was his insider, the time was too urgent. Cody came in the morning and gave him an invitation in the afternoon. The other party had no way to send him a message in real time, so when Mert suddenly appeared in front of Loud and asked to take away the ring of mysticism, Lin knew that something must have happened, which made Loud hand over the ring. Now it only took him 10 minutes to deal with William. If Loud was smart enough, he should be enjoying dinner with the substitute. When Lin arrived at the hall, he found that things seemed to be different from what he imagined. Wine stains and cups and plates were scattered all over the floor. The scene could only be described as chaos. After using chain lightning to deal with more than a dozen guards, Lin and Mert fished Loud, who was covered in dust, out of the trap. Loud stared at Mert with resentment. "Mr. Lord, there were a lot of people outside just now. Please forgive me for my previous offense," Mert said embarrassedly, and then stuffed the ring of mysticism into the other party's hand. "I said before that I would protect it with my life. P.S. According to your complaints, I wrote the enemy a little more cleverly. I have to spend some space to describe it. It's really not water. Chapter 248 Lin En. I'll only give you 10 seconds to think about it. Just like outside the fortress, Mert's words were very appropriate, so Loud couldn't find any faults. After all, he had reminded him so clearly, but someone was just stupid and didn't notice it at all. Loud was so angry that he thought Mert was definitely doing it on purpose to make him look bad in front of Lord Lin. This is definitely a difficult opponent to deal with. Thinking of this, Loud immediately turned around and boasted to Lin how he had just subdued William's double in the siege of a dozen burly men. Although he fell into the trap carefully arranged by the other party, he also tried to delay a lot of time. Lin patted Loud on the shoulder and said a few words of comfort. He didn't care to explain too much in the emergency just now, and of course he wouldn't blame the other party for making him so embarrassed. Then, Lin looked at the trembling fat man trapped in the underground palace below. "This is William's stand-in. His real name is Doral," Mert explained quickly. Lin En nodded. This stand-in really looked exactly like William. If you insist on saying the difference between the two, it's just that one is fatter and the other is thinner. How many people know about his existence? Lin En asked thoughtfully. Among all of William's trusted subordinates, there are less than 10 who know this, Mert responded. Lin En was relieved immediately and threw the corpse in his hand directly into the underground palace. The nearly 400-pound corpse fell heavily on the ground like a cannonball. Doral, who was curled up in the corner, had his pupils shrank slightly. Although William's body had been burned beyond recognition and there were few good pieces of meat on his body, the huge body still allowed him to recognize it at a glance. "I won't say anything more. It's up to you to decide whether to live or die." Lin En looked down at the fat figure in the underground palace and said indifferently, "I'll only give you 10 seconds to think about it." Dolar completely lost the arrogance that he had used to threaten Lord. Without even a second's hesitation, he prostrated himself on the ground and immediately expressed his willingness to follow the great wizard forever and loyally. After all, working for someone is not a job, and he had no gratitude towards William. Although William had turned him from a commoner into a high-ranking substitute who controlled the lives and deaths of thousands of people overnight, he had also fed him into a huge, ugly fat man, and even used blood magic to control his life. It was impossible to say that he had no hatred in his heart. "Very good." Lin En nodded with great satisfaction, and then let Lord and Mert pull him up. "Thank you for saving me, Master Wizard. Dolar will serve you until his death in the future." After being pulled up to the hall by the two men with difficulty, the short and fat Dolar rolled and crawled at Lin En's feet, nodding and bowing to please him. This is how he tried to please William before, but his overweight body made his movements look a little funny. Laud looked at Dolar with disgust, and couldn't help but murmur in his heart, how come these people were more skilled at flattering than himself? Which made Laud feel that his position was strongly threatened. Lin En knew the little conflict between the three people very well, but he didn't care, as long as it didn't affect the usual work. It might not be a bad thing for his subordinates to compete with each other. "Murder, Dolar, you will assist Laud in taking over the power of William's subordinates in the next few days. For those who are not sure to win over or hide, just deal with them directly. It's up to you to decide how to do it and who to keep. But I don't want any accidents to happen," Lin En warned. "I promise to solve these troubles perfectly, Lord Lin En." Laud immediately patted his chest and said. Lin En nodded again, and then looked at the chubby Dolar. "Give me your hand." Dolar didn't quite understand what Lin En meant, but he still stretched out his hand with a slight tremor. Lin En grabbed the other's chubby right hand. Doral soon felt a strong tingling sensation surge into his heart, and the flesh on his face trembled, but he dared not move. After Lin En released his hand, he found that there was a flame mark on his right hand. Unlike the mark on Loud's hand, this thing is not just a bluff, but a high-level use of alchemy. As long as Lin En's mind moves, it will be activated, and a strong white phosphorus fire will burst out, devouring the opponent. However, controlling life and death is not a perfect means, so Lin En rarely uses this thing to threaten his own people. But Doral obviously does not have his trust. "From today on, you are William, the real Viscount of the Empire, and the one who died is Doral," Lin En said word by word. In the next few days, with a substitute and the help of Mert, Laud naturally took over the power under William with great ease. In just 3 days, those confidants who knew William's identity as a substitute died silently under the butcher's knife of their companions. Of course, these were all small actions in secret. On the surface, everything was normal, and the entire manor was still managed by the imperial viscount. Lin did not intend to give up this line easily. After all, everyone in the kingdom knew that William was the most loyal supporter of the eldest Prince Harold. This identity was very important, which was equivalent to having an insider around the two heirs of the kingdom. He could get information from both sides at any time. During this period of time, Lin was also not idle. He studied another evil god statue looted from William's mansion, which was also the basis for the other party to use those strange blood magics. When dealing with the Doomsday cult in Greenreal City before, he also got a similar evil god statue, but it was a pity that he cut it in half with space vibration wave, and the power inside had been lost. But this evil god statue is still intact. Judging from William's memory, it should be a guy called Blood God. The name doesn't sound good. He should be a guy who was defeated in the Battle of Faith and still has some power left. It must be said that William is still a little smart, or has a certain degree of self-knowledge. He did not develop believers like the evil wizard Merc, but only learned some shallow blood magic from it. Later, he used the special drink brewed from the blood of Warcraft as the source of power, bypassed the statue of the evil god, and almost had the combat power comparable to the second and third ring-shaping wizards. The price is that he is as fat as a ball and uses his body to store energy. It's a pity that he was unlucky and faced himself. After years of accumulation, he died on the spot before he could exert his power. Chapter 249. The kingdom does not need nobles, let alone a king. This world is undoubtedly cruel. The ways to gain power are very limited. No matter how complicated the methods are, they cannot avoid magic and divine arts, or it is okay to classify them directly as magic. For those who are not gifted in magic, it becomes extremely difficult to gain power. Generally speaking, they have to practice their skills diligently, pass the church's assessment to get the opportunity to drink the divine potion, become a clergyman, or rely on the inheritance of family blood to become a blood knight, in order to gain power beyond normal people. Lin En even speculated that these so-called families with powerful inheritance should be descendants of some extremely powerful shaping wizards. The church did not kill them all, or, Ella, thought that these people did not pose any threat at all. It is precisely because there are not many ways to gain power, so even William, who has a lot of wealth and noble status, needs to rely on the means of evil god statues. According to the information that Laud and others have learned these days, worshipping evil gods is not a rare thing among some nobles, and it is even very popular in the Sekaz Empire. This is indeed a shortcut to become stronger quickly, but it is a pity that it is also a trap. Lin En turned the blood god statue in his hand over and over. He has always been very curious about what the divine arts are. It can actually allow a person to display all kinds of wonderful supernatural powers without knowing the principles of the spell. Obviously, this is not the church's patent. When dealing with those doomsday believers before, he noticed something wrong. The practice of shadow magic is very difficult, and most of them are recorded. As a result, when raiding the Doomsday Church station, a large number of wizards who can use shadow magic emerged. It is very likely that it was given in a way similar to divine arts. Lin En pondered for a long time. In fact, his behavior of connecting with wizards through the magic network and calling up computing power is somewhat similar to the faith to God method created by psychic wizards. They all use external forces to increase their own power limits. The difference is that his method is relatively mild, and he used the carrier of the intelligent brain. Perhaps it is for this reason that Lin En did not sense the mental pollution mentioned by Herve and others. Since part of the knowledge can be directly transmitted to other people's minds through the intelligent brain, if the other party's mental frequency is completely cracked, can it be achieved like a divine spell to bestow a magic on others? Maybe I can find an opportunity to try it. While thinking, a faint light lit up on the index finger of his right hand, and Lin En immediately realized that Anthony had entered the magic field again. In the small universe of magic mimicry, Anthony stepped into the void and stared at the picture of the stars that kept moving under his feet. Unlike the simple shock in the past, after systematically studying the knowledge of the Olympic mathematics, he has been able to deduce the relative position and operation law of each star. The contact in these days has made Anthony realize that Lin En's breadth of knowledge is far beyond his expectations. From the formation of thunder and lightning to the operation law of the universe and the stars, the other party can do it easily. However, in Lin En's words, this knowledge is only the foundation of the foundation, the most superficial law of the world, and the internal cause is another more profound subject, that is likely to be a world that can only be felt in the legendary field. It seems that you have something to ask me, Anthony? Lin En's figure emerged in the magic field, and asked in confusion, now is not the time for teaching. Yes, Anthony nodded, and then spoke again. In recent times, the old king's health has been deteriorating, and the dispute between the two princes has intensified. Now the second prince Hatch is preparing to win over or cut off some of the other's wings. I heard that William was sent by you to herald? Anthony asked cautiously. You can say that, Lin En responded freely. Then it will be much easier. Anthony breathed a sigh of relief, and then told Lin En about his plan for the Magic Kingdom. In simple terms, it is to secretly support the second Prince Hatart to take the throne, instigate the royal family and some nobles to confront the church, let wizards have a place to live in this country, and create a magical world that controls this kingdom in secret. But after knowing the existence of the Wizard Land and the Secret Law Society, Anthony's appetite is undoubtedly much bigger. Perhaps they can go a step further and cooperate with the royal family and some nobles to completely eradicate the power of the local church and create a country that truly belongs to wizards. However, in this way, they will have to face the crusade of the church and the Secus Empire. This is not something that wizards of a certain school can contend with, so Anthony must confirm the attitude of the Wizard Land and the Secret Law Society. Then after your magic kingdom is built, who will be the real ruler of this kingdom, wizards or nobles? Lin En asked suddenly after listening to Anthony's story. Of course, Anthony wanted to say wizards, but he knew very well that the power of the nobles was deeply rooted in the kingdom and could not be easily shaken. The wizards and the royal family can work together to manage the nobles, and then let the nobles manage the civilians. Anthony said thoughtfully, this is the most reasonable measure. If this continues, there will be problems sooner or later. Since those nobles are tired of being trampled on by the church, they will never tolerate wizards doing the same thing. Lin En said with certainty. Could it be that you plan to continue to maintain the status quo? Anthony frowned. In fact, he had never thought about gaining the right to rule over various territories before. As long as the kingdom of Hajarata can allow the existence of wizards and let them study magic openly without hiding, it would be a great victory in his opinion. In this way, there will be no contradiction between the nobles and wizards. No, Lin En shook his head. Your magic kingdom plan is good, but the pattern is too low. Anthony paused for a moment, not quite understanding what the other party meant. In my opinion, the kingdom of Hajarata does not need nobles, let alone a king. Lin En said solemnly, the most taboo thing about reform is that it is not thorough, leaving behind a large number of old interest groups, which become maggots that disintegrate the system internally, not to mention that the conflicts between them and the nobles are sharp and unavoidable. To use the simplest analogy, if most of the kingdom's subjects enter the factory and obey his orders, where is the power and dignity of the nobles? So it is only a matter of time before conflicts break out. Chapter 250. You underestimate the power and anger of the people. No nobles, let alone a king? Anthony was astonished by Lin's fantastic idea. There are no nobles or kings in the land of wizards. Everything is in the hands of the Wizard Council, Lin explained. A kingdom that belongs exclusively to wizards. Anthony murmured softly. This was indeed an exciting proposal. But wouldn't we have to go against everyone in the kingdom? Anthony asked hesitantly. Isn't this a big deal? The power of the nobles is deeply rooted in the kingdom of Hajarata, not to mention that they also need to deal with the power of the church. The nobles and the royal family can't represent the entire kingdom. Lin sneered. Don't forget, we have another force that we can support. The largest number of people in the kingdom are the laborers in the mines. You mean the slaves? Anthony frowned. I don't think these people can cause any trouble. You underestimate their power and anger. These miners are oppressed and treated inhumanely on weekdays. They are like a powder keg that explodes at any time. If used well, they can overthrow the entire kingdom. Lin En said confidently. He also knew why Anthony was so pessimistic about the miners. Because in this world, ordinary people would find it difficult to resist the clergy who have mastered extraordinary powers even if they gather together. Often, after a few divine spells, the poor people who were temporarily organized and holding farm tools and mining drafts would collapse and flee. But these talents represent the majority of the kingdom. They just lack a leader and the courage and strength to resist. Of course, Lin En did not intend to take action against the nobles so quickly. At least before the church's power was completely eradicated, these people could still be used. With Lin En's constant explanation, Anthony soon understood what he meant. First, use the power of the royal family and the nobles to deal with the church, and then finally clear all these people out to create a country that belongs exclusively to wizards. So what should we do now? Anthony asked. Wait for a suitable opportunity, Lin said. He had asked Laud to send people to sneak into several mines in the kingdom of Hadrada. I believe that it won't be long before we can see the results. The Al-Risparani is located in a town facing the sea on the east side of the kingdom. Although the land here is barren and the environment is harsh, it has extremely rich iron ore resources. What makes the Baron even happier is that recently someone in the capital is buying a large number of various ores, causing the price to rise. Rumor has it that this may be related to the dispute over the royal heir. For Baron Elvis, who is greedy for pleasure and has no ambition, it doesn't matter which prince ascends the throne. He only cares about whether he can take advantage of this rare opportunity to make a fortune and make up for the increasingly deficit in the finances due to the extravagant life. And the task of increasing production naturally fell on Rupert, the supervisor. Rupert lived up to the Baron's expectations, and the amount of iron ore shipped to the capital increased almost every week. However, things were not always so smooth. Rupert was very disappointed to find that the hard-working miners had learned to be lazy in recent days. As long as he was not paying attention, someone would take advantage of the darkness of the mine and curl up in the corner to sleep. How could Rupert not be angry? If the output of ore did not satisfy the Baron and he blamed him, it would not be a joke. Get up, all of you. Rupert waved the long whip in his hand vigorously, hitting a ragged middle-aged man who was huddled in the mine. Lord Rupert, spare me, I'm too hungry. I really don't have the strength. The man rolled on the ground after being whipped again and again, shouting, Waste, everyone else is working hard to dig ore, but you are the only one who has no strength. Rupert's hand strength increased again, and with one blow, the man's chest was torn apart. He was ready to beat him to death on the spot as a deterrent, so that other miners would remember it for a long time. This is the end of trying to be lazy. The sound of the long whip breaking through the air and the man's wailing intertwined. The miners present were trembling with fear, and they didn't even dare to stop their actions, let alone excuse the man, for fear that the long whip would hit them in the next moment. Enough, stop hitting, a voice suddenly sounded in the crowd. Rupert turned his head with an ugly face, wanting to see who dared to challenge his majesty. A young man in his 20s stood up, wearing a coarse linen shirt full of holes and a dirty face. Because he could only eat black bread and wheat leaves for a long time, his body was very thin, as if a gust of wind could blow him down, but the stubbornness in his eyes was unusually strong. Redel, don't think that I won't kill you just because you know a little bit about herbs and can treat the injuries of these lowly miners. You'd better recognize your identity, Rupert said fiercely, and then whipped the other person in the face with a whip. The boy named Redel had no time to dodge, let alone dodge. He took the whip and fell to the ground. A bloody mark was left on his right face. The intense pain suddenly surged into his heart. But Redel still endured the pain, got up from the ground, and begged for mercy in a low voice. Lord Rupert, more than a dozen people died in the mine accident last week. If Uncle Ham also died, the output of iron ore this week would probably be even less. Please, spare him. Rupert hesitated. He didn't care about the life and death of a miner, but as the other party said, Before the next batch of miners arrived, every person who died would reduce the output of ore. The surrounding miners also put down their tools at this moment, watching the situation on the field silently. When Riddle was whipped by Rupert, some even wanted to stand up and speak for him, but they were finally stopped. Riddle was different from Ham, and was a very important person in this mine. These miners were digging ore in the mine day and night, and injuries were inevitable. However, the stingy Rupert would not hire a doctor for them. Many people relied on Riddle's half-baked medical skills to barely save their lives. Most people remembered this favor in their hearts, so after Riddle was whipped, many miners spontaneously put down their tools. This was a silent protest. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.